The following program is an MLWRadio.com production.
From the territories to Titan Towers to TNA and all points in between, he's seen and done it all. And now, he's here to share the real story behind wrestling's biggest moments, controversies, and characters. The MLW Radio Network presents Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with. It's your show. This is where you talk, Bruce.
You know, I was all prepared for a long pause there, and instead I just get a bleep.
Well, listen, here's the deal. I'm in control of ribs on the show. You were in control once upon a time, but since I'm the one with the recording device here, I guess what we'll call final edits, and ribs still rule. Am I right?
Oh, without a doubt, they still rule, and Ribomania is running wild.
What are we talking about? We're talking about brand new shirts that you can check out right now at ProWrestlingTees.com/Bruce Prichard. Ribom is the #1 hit seller at our t-shirt store, and to go ahead and grow on that, we did Ribs Still Rule, Ribomania. We got lots of stuff coming out. My favorite new one, though, No Yob.
No Yob. No Yob. I used to be over. That comes right out of the box of gimmicks, in case you didn't know, folks. But that's not just rumor and innuendo. And if you go to ProWrestlingTees.com/Bruce Prichard, you find out that I wrote this shit. And you don't put a T in my name. You put one on your back, folks. Because if I wanted to hook you, by God, you'd be hooked.
You will be hooked on all these great shirts and at a great value. Go right now, ProWrestlingTees.com/Bruce Prichard. It's the best way to support the show and at the same time interact with the show. You know why? Bruce is going to call and thank you, and that is not a rib. Go ahead, check it out right now, ProWrestlingTees.com/Bruce Prichard. Bruce, let's put a bow on last week's episode. What won the poll the week before was Mr. Perfect, and then we kind of took a week off and did just rapid-fire Q&A from our listeners, and we did it right there on Twitter. We called the show #LoveToKnow. What was the feedback you got from last week's show, Bruce?
Well, feedback from me personally was, I loved it, because I didn't have to prepare. It was great. You didn't have to prepare. You just hit me rapid-fire questions, and I hit you back rapid-fire answers. But if there was any main feedback, was that we need more Voodoo Ooze.
Voodoo Ooze was probably one of the more talked about segments. Also really, really popular was me getting tickled with Vince saying I wouldn't be on TV if I was dead, which I still think is amazing. But easily the most talked about segment from last week was when we had a table full of wrestlers ordering lunch, and you went on a roll with your impressions. What was the one that stuck out to you or that you got the most compliments on?
Piper, believe it or not.
Really?
That shocked me that the majority of feedback I got was people loved the Piper one.
I played it for a mutual friend of ours who's in the business over the weekend, and he was on me all night about, I just don't understand. How does anybody give a shit about Brother Love and the Mortgage Guy on a podcast? I don't even have guests. And I played that clip for him, and he listened to it all the way through, and he put it down on the chicken salad recipe and said, okay, I get it. But, you know, you did point out, we missed one. We missed an impression.
Did.
Who's the impression? Can you give us a taste of it? And go ahead, and while you're doing it, plug his podcast.
Well, goddamn, slobber knocker, so cold, so cold. Good old JR. We left JR out. We didn't order any ribs with extra sauce on the side.
So
that's just wrong. And Jim Ross has a great podcast over on Podcast One that is called The Ross Report, and he's a friend of the show, and we just want to give him a good little shout out there.
He was on TV over the weekend for bowl season. He actually made the trip to watch his Sooners smash the Auburn Tigers. They're now 2-0 against the state in bowl games in the last few years, so good for JR. I'm sure we'll hear a lot about that on this week's Ross Report.
And I know that put a big smile on his face. So
Well, it put a big smile on my face listening to Conversations with the Big Guy this week. Ryback put the show over huge, very complimentary. Didn't realize he was a listener. Glad to know he's listening. And you actually know Ryan, isn't that right?
I do. I'm glad he's not a listener and not pissed off at the show, because I wouldn't want him pissed off at me. That's for damn sure. But I know Ryan from back when he was in Ohio Valley Wrestling, Louisville, Kentucky. And he was always coming up with creative new stuff back then. And it's nice to know that he's listening.
Absolutely. We appreciate the support there. Also want to give a quick shout out to some other folks. I know that Tyson Kidd has been a big listener with us for a long time. I had an opportunity to chat with him over the weekend. Huge fan of his work. It's a shame that we're not seeing him in the ring right now. Hopefully there's more to come in that regard, but we appreciate his support. I also heard from Justin Roberts. He's enjoying the show these days. And I know that you've had some conversations as well with Will Sasso. Am I right?
Yeah, I was shocked to hear that Will Sasso was a big fan of the show, and we reached out and tweeted back and forth a direct message. And I'm a big fan of his. And you talk about a guy that can do some impressions. Will Sasso is off the charts hilarious, and I'm a big fan of his.
And before we get out of here, we should also mention that Sam Roberts has been a big supporter of the show for a long time. And if you haven't already, you should go check out his podcasts. There are so many great podcast options out there right now. We should go ahead and plug his show as well. You can follow him on Twitter. He's phenomenal. If you want to follow somebody entertaining who likes to talk wrestling, he's at Not Sam on Twitter. And of course, check out Conversations with the Big Guy for Ryback and the Ross Report for Jim Ross. This is not a competition, folks. There is something in this wrestling podcast genre for everyone, unless you're a huge Ric Flair fan. This week marked the end of the Ric Flair show, and we should just go ahead and address this here. Without the Ric Flair show, Bruce Prichard and I would not be doing this show right now. Is that fair to say, Bruce?
I know that. That is definitely fair to say. Without Ric Flair, we wouldn't be doing this show right now. So
I wouldn't even know you without Ric Flair.
That's true. So I have a big debt of gratitude to extend to Rick, because, as you say, I wouldn't have met you and we wouldn't be doing our thing right now.
So just to clear up any rumor and innuendo, nothing happened. There was no falling out. No one's upset with anyone. Rick is not in poor health. Everything's okay. He's just busier than a one-armed paper hanger, and it became something that was no longer as fun. When his schedule got busier, it became more of a chore and less of just a fun hobby. And so when it wasn't as fun as it used to be, Rick didn't want to do it. And that's kind of the story of everybody's interaction with Rick. Is that fair to say, Bruce?
Sure it is. And it's also good to know that he's a whole hell of a lot busier in doing the things that he loves to do. And at some point, something had to go. And that's just the way that the cookie crumbles sometimes.
It's happened before. It may happen again. But to clear everything up, Rick's not in poor health. There's no falling out. He and I are still fine. He's not angry with Bruce. Someone on Twitter called you the Yoko of our podcast group, that you have somehow broken up the Beatles here, Bruce. You're Yoko.
Oh, goddamn. For a minute, I thought you were going to say it was Yokozuna, and I'm trying to figure out how the hell does Yoko figure in all. Okay, now I get it. But what the hell?
Well, either way, I'm sure.
Well, they probably read that on a dirt sheet somewhere already. They're probably all already reporting the rumor, innuendo, and conspiracy theories out there.
Well, we're going to have a good time talking about all of that this week with the $1 Million Man. But before we get into that, we want to remind you, this is the topic you voted for. It was our most voted on poll ever. And we encourage you to vote this coming Sunday. The polls go up on Sunday afternoon or evening, and they're up on until the wee hours of the night on Tuesday morning. So you have an opportunity to vote Sunday night or anytime Monday or during Monday Night Raw. And then we're going to go ahead and crank out what you want to hear next Friday right here on Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. And at the very end of the show, when we finish talking about the $1 Million Man, we're going to tell you what those topics are going to be and why we think they would be fun to cover. But what everybody agreed, almost unanimously, I mean, this was a runaway. I didn't see it coming. The $1 Million Man, an overwhelming majority voted for the $1 Million Man. And you don't have to have $1 million to be eating good in 2017. Am I right, Bruce?
You don't, and it's not the cheapest thing. It sounds crazy, but it's not the cheapest thing to feed a family of four at home for let's say under $20 a person. Sometimes if you want to go out, you're going to spend a lot more than that. But BlueApron.com has a solution.
They really do, and they're doing it with top quality ingredients. In fact, Blue Apron is the #1 fresh ingredient and recipe delivery service in the entire country. And as you mentioned, it's very affordable. For less than $10 per person per meal, Blue Apron is going to deliver seasonal recipes along with pre-portioned ingredients to make delicious home-cooked meals.
Well, and plus, like my family, okay, it's my wife, and we've got 2 kids. We got twins, 17 years old. And we all like to cook together. And with Blue Apron, the family all gets in the kitchen. Everything is already pre-measured out. You don't have to go out and buy a thing. It's all there. And guess what? It's actually pretty damn good. We had it on New Year's Eve. All of us got in the kitchen. We cooked the meals, and it was actually really, really good.
Check this out, too. The variety can't be beat. Recipes are not repeated within a year, so you'll never get bored.
You won't get bored or bored for that matter, because it's always changing. And whether you do it 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, it's up to you.
It's very flexible, too. There's no weekly commitment. You only get the deliveries when you want them. And oh, by the way, it's easy. It's so easy, Brother freaking Love can do it. But best of all, it's guaranteed. Guaranteed that I can't pronounce shit, and it's also guaranteed that it's going to arrive on time and the way you need it, or they'll make it right. But here's what you really need to know. If you check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals free, you hear that? With free shipping,
Free.
All you've got to do is go to blueapron.com/wrestling. You will love how good it feels, how good it tastes, and how good it is to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron. So don't wait. Go to blueapron.com/wrestling. That's blueapron.com/wrestling. Blue Apron, a better way to cook. All right, let's get into it. What happened when the $1 Million Man came to the World Wrestling Federation? It happened in 1987, Bruce. We're at the 30-year anniversary. How old does that make you feel?
You ain't funny.
Well, it's not funny either how over this gimmick was, and I can't wait to talk about it. But before we talk about the $1 Million Man, let's talk about regular old Ted DiBiase. Ted was actually adopted by Iron Mike DiBiase, who was a wrestler. And when Ted was 15 years old, his father Mike passed away when he suffered a heart attack during a match. So he actually died in the ring. Any memories of Ted's father, Iron Mike DiBiase, Bruce?
I remember as a kid in the when I lived in El Paso, Texas, we got TV out of the Amarillo territory, and I actually saw Ted's father wrestle. And, you know, Ted's mom was also a wrestler, Helen Hill.
Wow.
So you didn't know that, did you?
I did not know that.
So he comes from an all-around wrestling family. His mom was a professional wrestler as well, went by the name, I believe it was Helen Hill. That's not a real name, but that's what she worked as. And they adopted Ted and raised him up right, by God, in West Texas. And Teddy went on to West Texas State University, where the Funks went, where Tito Santana, Tully Blanchard, just all the greats, Texas greats, went to West Texas State University, and that produced a lot of great professional wrestlers.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because so many guys went through there, and we've all heard about West Texas State. Like you said, you know, Ted DiBiase, Dusty Rhodes, Tully Blanchard, you know, Terry and Dory Funk, Bobby Duncombe, Manny Fernandez. What do you think it was about West Texas State that created so many professional wrestlers?
The water.
Okay.
I don't know. It's really strange. I don't know if it was simply that the Funks were based out of Amarillo and based in the area there, and they were a big part of that football program, and were close and just made relationships with the guys in the football program and got the athletes out of that wanted to be wrestlers. But there were quite a few of them. Yeah,
there really were, and it has quite a legacy to professional wrestling. Speaking of wrestling, though, Ted goes ahead and finishes college there and decides to follow in his dad's footsteps and become a professional wrestler. He went on to be trained by Terry and Dory Funk Jr., and you're not going to find, too many trainers better than that. Dory still operates a wrestling school in Ocala, Florida, and I'm pretty sure that we will do a separate show. But do you have any specific stories about Dory training guys that you could mention here?
Wow, Dory, in his later years, when he would come up to the WWE and do what we called the Funkin' Dojo, which Dory would come up for a week or two, and we would bring in guys from all over the world to come to the studios, come to we called it the warehouse, where we had a ring set up. And Dory and my brother Tom would take guys and train them for a couple weeks, and we would get to see them up close and personal to see what guys had. We would kind of raid independents and bring top independent wrestlers from all over the world and have them come in and let Dory and Tom play with them for a couple weeks.
Ted actually makes his in-ring debut as a referee, and this happens in June of '74 right there in the Amarillo territory. Not long after that, he moves on to Bill Watts Mid-South promotion, where he works his first year as a wrestler from the summer of '85 until the summer of '76. Fast forward to '78, and he actually defeats Dick Slater to become the Missouri State Champion, but loses it a few weeks later to Dick Murdoch. And to younger fans, Bruce, kind of put in perspective what the Missouri Championship meant, because that was a bigger title than I think some young people really understand.
Well, the reason that the Missouri State Championship was such a big title, it was akin to, in the territory days, it was akin to what the Intercontinental Championship is like today. And it was a stepping stone to the World Championship. And the reason it was a stepping stone was that Sam Mushnick, who was the president of the National Wrestling Alliance, promoted St. Louis. St. Louis being in Missouri. And in that promotion, the Missouri Championship was their main title, and guys that were being groomed for the World Heavyweight Championship would oftentimes spend a little time in the St. Louis area, and if they became the Missouri State Champion, then usually people would start looking at them going, okay, here's the future champion right here.
I don't know when we'll talk about him again. Do you have anything interesting you can throw at us for Murdoch and Slater, or shall we move on?
Oh, we can move on. There's enough Dick Slater and Dick Murdoch stories.
Do you have any
to fill a few podcasts, but there's also a whole lot that shouldn't be talked about. Let's say that.
Give me one we shouldn't talk about.
Well, Dick Murdoch
Here we go.
Dickie was a barroom brawler, and that wasn't a gimmick, folks. That was real life. And I'll never forget when in later years, this was in the 80s, so this was mid-80s, that Murdoch came back in, and his gimmick was Captain Redneck, Dick Murdoch. And Houston, of course, was a stop on the Mid-South tour. And Murdoch coming through. Houston is famous for, right outside of Houston, a little town called Pasadena, Texas. And in Pasadena, Texas, they had a honky-tonk. For those that don't know what a honky-tonk is like a country and western bar where they primarily sell beer. And they do mixed drinks, but none of these fancy Dan mixed drinks and shit that you see in bars these days. And they dance to country and western music. They had both kinds of music, country and western. And Gilley's was made famous with the movie Urban Cowboy, which starred John Travolta and Deborah Winger. And Gilley's was just a dive. It was a gigantic, it was the world's largest honky-tonk. It was a giant, we called it a kicker bar because there was a country station in Houston called KIKK. And if you listen to KIKK, then you was a kicker. So if you went out to Gilley's, the other gimmick at Gilley's was they always put a bumper sticker on everybody's car. So no matter where you were all over Houston, you'd see people with these Gilley's stickers on. Anyway, get back to Dick Murdoch. Dick Murdoch the name fit him perfectly, Captain Redneck. Dickie loved to fight. And Murdoch, when he would finish up the matches Friday nights in Houston, first place that Murdoch would want to go would be out to Gilley's. And as soon as Murdoch would walk in the place, he'd belly up to the bar, get himself a cold beer. And within, I would usually say, no less than 5 minutes, there would be some other big redneck that would have to come up and say, "Hey, ain't you one of them fake wrestlers on the TV?" To which Murdoch would respond with a punch to the jaw. So this happens, we ran every other week. So this happens over a 6-week period. Every single show, Murdoch would leave the Coliseum and go down to Gilley's and get in a fight, so much so that the newspaper columnists would report on Dick Murdoch's after Friday night at the Coliseum fights at Gilley's. And finally, Watts had to ask Murdoch to please stop going to Gilley's, and Gilley's made the request to please ask Murdoch not to stop by for a cold beverage anymore.
That's awesome. Well, there you go. That's why you listen to Something to Wrestle With. You're tuned into a $1 Million Man podcast, and you get a Captain Redneck story. Ted goes on to have a short run in the WWF in 1979 when he became the first ever North American champion. He ends up losing the title to Pat Patterson, who then merged that title with the South African Championship and later became the very first Intercontinental Champion after that grueling tournament we've talked about before in Rio de Janeiro, which, as we all know, was a shoot and had him hanging off from the rafters.
Damn right.
A little bit of wrestling history here, a little trivia for you. Who was Hulk Hogan's first ever opponent in Madison Square Garden? And Hulk is working as a heel.
Theodore DiBiase.
On December 12th, 1979. I find that fascinating, consider that 10 years later when they would cross paths, it was totally different for both of these guys. After leaving the WWF, Ted goes on to work in Georgia and some other territories. He wrestled all the big names at the time: Ric Flair, Paul Orndorff, the One Man Gang, the Fabulous Freebirds. There's lots of big names on that list. What of those sticks out the most to you about his feuds in that early 80s era?
Probably Dick Slater at the time, because in Georgia at that time you had DiBiase, you had Slater, and Ted was that white meat babyface. He was a traditional get fired up, slap the mat, mess his hair up, and make that fiery comeback. And Slater was just an old-fashioned, methodical heel. And they were perfectly matched, both just great workers. And during that time, I would have to say that DiBiase and Slater were two of the best, and they hooked them up in Georgia.
Yeah, they really did. And if you haven't seen any of DiBiase's early stuff, it's worth throwing in your Google machine, because there is stuff out there that is worth looking at for sure. He goes back to Mid-South in 1980 and stays there until he goes to the WWF in 87. He does do some time in All Japan in 83, and he wins the NWA United National Championship in a tournament on October 13th by defeating Jerry Lawler by forfeit. DiBiase lost the title to Doot Doot Doot. What are your memories of old Doot 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 as a wrestler? We've never talked about that. Back in 82, he was Pro Wrestling Illustrated's most hated wrestler. Your memories of Doot 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 as a performer?
Most hated by the boys or by the fans?
Listen to you.
Doot. He knows I love him, damn it. Well, Michael Hayes had a mouth on him, still does have a mouth on him. And Michael, if you were to do a wrestling clinic and try to explain to people how to talk the people into the building, you would have Michael Hayes teach that class, because Michael would talk the people into the building. Michael always had, from the day that he started in the business, a money promo. If he was going to talk, by God, he was going to sell tickets and he was going to put asses in seats. And he did it from the very first day that he started. So Michael had the gift of gab. Michael wasn't the greatest worker in the world, but he didn't have to be because he had Terry Bam Bam Gordy and Buddy Roberts on his side. All Michael had to do was run his mouth, get people in the building, and take a hell of an ass whooping. But he wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination either.
No, but he would say, hey, I wasn't the best, but I didn't have to be. So it is what it is. Switching gears back to DiBiase, I'm trying to kind of paint a picture here, talking about all these different territories and these titles. But specifically, I want to talk a good deal about All Japan. He goes on to win some tag belts with Stan Hansen there, and they held him for nearly 2 years. And guys were notorious in the 80s for whenever they could taking frequent tours of Japan. And they had a much different working style than American wrestling did. And DiBiase has often said that Terry Funk used to tell him, in America, you're thinking work and trying to make it look like a shoot. But in Japan, you're thinking shoot and trying to make it look like a work. Could you kind of explain the difference in the styles to maybe someone who doesn't understand what Japanese wrestling was like in the 80s compared to here in America?
Well, I would have to say Japanese wrestling for an American was, first of all, it was great pay, but going over there, you're, for the most part, usually being brought in as a heel. So in Japan, the Americans were the dastardly evil heels. I mean, after all, we blew up their country. So for guys that were baby faces in the States, it was a different world and a whole different style when they went to Japan, because they're not being cheered. They're not working a baby face style. And the Japanese were very into shoot style, or I guess strong style, whatever the fuck they call it, but they beat the shit out of each other. Yeah. And where in the States, here you are, and as Terry eloquently said, you try to work and take care of your opponent, make it look like it hurts like hell, but it doesn't actually. Over there, it hurt like hell and didn't always look that great, but they beat the shit out of each other. So it's just a completely different mindset, but the money was good, and it would give you a break and kind of rest you up from the time wherever you're working back in the States. And DiBiase, it's one of those stories of right place, right time, and timing being everything. Because Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody were the big tag team for All Japan. Right. And Brody left and went to work for Inoki. So when he did that, left Hansen without a partner. And Hansen needed a partner, and DiBiase was right place, right time, and he got the nod.
I mean, really think about that. You're replacing Brody in Japan. I mean, I'm trying to really lay the groundwork here so you can appreciate what people think of DiBiase as a performer. Let's talk about Watts in Mid-South a little bit. The North American title there was his 4 times. He defeated Mike George, Paul Orndorff, Junkyard Dog, and Brad Armstrong for those opportunities. His business with Junkyard Dog was huge. They worked as a tag team that Ted referred to as kind of salt and pepper. And then he turned heel, loading up that black glove. And he also went ahead and did a lot of tag team work there too. 5-time Mid-South Tag Team Champion, holding those with Mr. Olympia, Matt Bourne, Hercules Hernandez, and twice with Dr. Death, Steve Williams. So he's worked everywhere here in Mid-South, both Mid-South and the UWF, as a babyface and as a heel. Had a phenomenal tuxedo match that people still talk about with Hacksaw Jim Duggan. I don't know. Well, go ahead. Are you criticizing the phenomenal?
No, it was phenomenal.
Why was it phenomenal? But if you haven't seen it, why would people say it's phenomenal? You know what I'm talking about.
Well, here's the thing. Was leading up to it, it was in a period in Mid-South. It was Mid-South at that time. We may have been UWF at that time. I don't really recall. But we used to get the cards sent in, and JR would hand write out the card for each individual town. And
let's take a time out right there. Jim Ross is helping run things for Bill Watts. He is kind of the right-hand man of Bill Watts. So if you've only known Jim Ross as the head of talent relations for the WWF or as a commentator on television, even back in the day, he was in the office and he was the right hand of Bill Watts. Is that fair to say?
That's very fair to say. And it's also fair to say that Jim Ross stuck his neck out for me and helped get me in the office with Bill Watts. I was already in the office in Houston with Paul Bosch, but Jim helped me a great deal getting me on air with Mid-South UWF as a interviewer and ring announcer and different things on national television, and also helping out with the TV and different things with UWF. But JR would send out the cards after the booking, and he would send out the cards for each town. And DiBiase and Duggan had every single match imaginable. They had coal miner glove on a pole match where you put a coal miner's glove on top of a pole. You had to climb the pole, get the glove. You could use the glove. They had cage matches. They had Texas death matches. They had no DQ, no count out, fucking set your balls on fire match. They had every kind of match you could possibly imagine. And we were actually sitting in Houston thinking, Jesus Christ, what the hell is left to do? There's nothing left to do with Duggan and DiBiase. Of course, we had the loser leave town when it's time for Teddy to go make his Japan trip. And sure enough, the envelope was sent in FedEx, and we opened it up, and it's Duggan versus DiBiase in a cage. Loser leave town. Coal miner's glove on a pole. No DQ, no count out, obviously, because you're in a cage, but all this shit's laid out. And the last thing was both men will be wearing tuxedos and the loser gets painted yellow. So you have every fucking gimmick in the world in one match because they had already done all of them up to that point. So let's just throw them all in one fucking match and have that go around the horn. So it was a joke, but it was reality. it really actually happened.
And it's out there. It's on the Mid-South DVD that was released in September of 2013. Jim Ross did commentary for it. Another shout out to our good buddy JR. Good old JR does commentary on that match. And it was the first time I saw it, and there was lots of hype online that, man, these guys beat the shit out of each other. You got to check it out. And I'm like, I don't know about that, whatever. And then you watch it and you're like, okay, this is different than what I thought. Now, when you're mentioning all this stuff, coal miner's glove in a cage, tuxedo, blah, blah, blah. Ted DiBiase has credited the business being on fire for a year or so to Dundee as booker. But he also says that the reason Mid-South got in the shape they were in is because Dundee just hot-shotted the territory.
Correct.
So, he says that he knew the writing was on the wall when he saw they were hot-shotting everything because they had been doing good, consistent business when it was just Watts. But when Dundee's brought in and they start doing all this Memphis-type stuff where it's gimmick, eventually there's nowhere else to go.
That is correct.
We follow that strategy here on the show, which is why we don't do Vince McMahon one week, Austin the next week, the Invasion the next week, The Rock the next week. What are we going to do in 2 months? We'll be done. So we stretch that a little bit, and we talk for 2 or 3 damn hours about the $1 Million Man. So while this is all going on, and this feels like a good time to talk about it, there's lots of talk about what will DiBiase do. There were rumors at the time that DiBiase was being groomed to be NWA World Champion. And I don't know how much of that you heard, how much of that was rumor and innuendo, but even Ric Flair would say he's probably the best wrestler he never lost it to. Do you think that DiBiase was ever in serious consideration, or did Rick politically have a fence around it at that time?
I don't know if Rick politically had a fence around it at that time. They were switching off him and Dusty, and but it was Crockett controlled. Jim Crockett controlled the championship at that time, and Crockett's guy was Flair. So Crockett controlled it. Dusty was the booker, and DiBiase wasn't a Crockett guy. So when you backtrack and you look at the UWF, and in all of this, you have to take into consideration it was during a time that Bill Watts was looking to sell the UWF, the territory. And he had just opened up beautiful offices in Dallas, Texas, and so on and so forth. And he ends up making a deal with Jim Crockett to sell the UWF to Crockett. And in doing so, there was, and this is a whole nother show, man, talking about that deal. But I was there for a lot of that. And there were just a lot of assumptions made, and there were a lot of questions, but the questions never really got answered. Like guys that were working for Bill Watts, if Jim Crockett now he has bought the territory, is Crockett going to honor my contract? Am I still going to get paid the same? Am I still going to be used? There were a lot of questions and not a whole lot of answers forthcoming. Well, as all this is taking place, I'm working in the Houston office. I'm also doing UWF TV, and DiBiase is in Japan. So Ted is in Japan where all this shit's going on, and he doesn't know what's happening. He's hearing everything long distance. Well, in the middle of all this shit, I'm talking to Vince McMahon about what's going to happen with me. So Crockett buys territory. I call Vince that day from Louisiana, and I say, hey, here's what's happening here. I was not a big fan of Jim Crockett, and
why?
Why? I had worked with him in some Superdome shows and some other things over the years, and he just was very aloof to me, and I didn't care for him. It was kind of like oil and water.
Let me ask you this. When you say he was aloof to me, do you mean he was aloof to you personally, or you found his demeanor in general to everyone to be aloof based on your observation?
Both.
Okay.
Both. And he was one of those guys that if they didn't know who you were, could treat you like a piece of shit. And then once somebody would say, oh, hey, this is so-and-so, he's a good guy. Oh, hey, buddy, how you doing? And
you found him to be disingenuous.
That's a perfect word.
Okay.
So I didn't have any desire to work for Jim Crockett. So I made my calls, and I was going to go to work for Vince. Vince and I kind of had a understanding on the phone that I would go to work for him, and he got me up to Connecticut. And this whole time, DiBiase's in Japan.
Now, let me ask you this. Ted has said that when he knew, because you were pretty good buddies with him, even back to the Houston days, he's seeing that, hey, this is coming to an end here. The territory is going to be on the way down now with Dundee as booker. He's maybe hot shot of the territory to death. So he's thinking maybe I'll work more in Japan, and he's not sure what he's going to do, but he knows that you're having these secret conversations with Vince McMahon. And he says that he said, hey, Bruce, mention my name. See if there's any interest. Is that what happened?
That is true. But see, Dundee had already left. Ken Mantell had taken over the book
but it's too late. It's too late though.
It was an uphill battle at that point. The damage had been done. But yes, DiBiase, he stayed at my house whenever he was in Houston, and we were good friends. We made the towns together, and yeah, we were buddies. So During this time, he did. He knew I was going to New York, and while I was there, he said, hey, ask if there's any interest. So in my meeting with Vince, once I made sure I was good, let's take care of yourself first. I said, hey, is there any interest in Ted DiBiase? And Vince's ears perked up and said, well, sure. What's his contractual status? What's he doing? I said, well, he doesn't have one because his deal with Watts was a separate deal, and that was over with the sale. And there was talk that Crockett wanted him and that Crockett wanted to offer Ted a contract. And there was those rumor and innuendo that they wanted to groom Ted for the world championship, but no one had really spoken to Ted about that.
Right.
And he wasn't getting straight answers about, well, what kind of money deal is there on the table?
Let me kind of run through that. Ted has said that what happens is he comes back and is booked for Fort Worth TV. And he goes, and when he's there, he talks to Jim Crockett himself. And Crockett says something along the lines of, we'd love to have you on board. What's it going to take to get you? And Ted said, well, I know what Luger's making, and he doesn't know the business, and he's not the performer I am. He's just a look. And I am worth every bit of what you're paying him. And Crockett goes for it and says, okay, fair enough. So he thinks he's got a big money deal with this Luger concept and at least having a verbal commitment. And he tries to get a cherry on top and says, and I get to go to Japan. And Crockett even co-signs that. But he doesn't have him sign anything. A week goes by and there's still no contact. And then Vince calls and asks him to come up. And I'm sure you have more details about how that phone call goes. Do you want to shed any light on that?
Well, yeah, I'd asked Vince if there was any interest in DiBiase, and I told Ted was in Japan, and I want to say that we spoke when I was out at the Westin in Stamford. Said, yeah, there's interest, and gave him Vince's numbers and told him to call. They spoke. And all this time, there's also rumblings. He comes back, he does the meeting with Crockett and so on and so forth. And he said, I'm still talking to Ted back and forth. He says, is there really any interest? What they want to do? Well, Vince had shared with me that he had a gimmick in mind.
But he didn't say what it was.
Didn't say what well, I knew what yes, he did tell me what it was. But I was sworn to secrecy. I couldn't tell DiBiase.
Okay, so I want to circle back to that because this is so critical to me. But just for a second, let's make sure everybody's following along here. Jim Crockett is taking over the world now. He's trying to expand to counter-program what Vince has already got a head start on. They're going national. The biggest piece of that is to buy out the next biggest guy, which is Bill Watts. One of Bill Watts' top guys, whether it's babyface or heel, any way you slice it, is Ted DiBiase. Watts has had a few of his other guys go north and blow up. Junkyard Dog was a huge star for them. Hacksaw Jim Duggan and others would be huge stars for them. So Ted DiBiase is one of the hottest free agents in the business at this time. Is that fair to say, Bruce?
Yes.
And it's worth mentioning, Vince McMahon has this gimmick that he refuses to tell DiBiase about. He says he has something in mind, and he wants to talk to him about it in person, and he won't tell it to him over the phone. So he says, go have your meeting with Crockett, but don't sign anything. I want to see you in person before I tell you about this gimmick, and you want to hear it before you sign. They offer him a big contract, and supposedly he's being groomed to work with Ric Flair for the world title back when the NWA world title actually meant something. In the middle of all this, Vince McMahon has created this $1 Million Man character and told Bruce Prichard about it. So tell me the first time you have this conversation about the gimmick, how he pitches it. And I don't want to hear you say it.
Well, actually, though, Pat Patterson is the one who explained the gimmick to me first.
Okay, so I'll be Bruce, and you be Pat. So what? so what do you guys have in mind for DiBiase? What's this gimmick Vince keeps talking
You
about?
will not believe what they have for DiBiase. I tell you, you have the DiBiase. Imagine him in the $1,000 suit, right? And he's dressed and he's nice, and everywhere he goes, he buys everything. And I'm not doing a good Pat. He sounds like a fucking pizza maker.
You always do that, though.
I know. But he just explained it about that he would buy everything and he would be this wealthy guy and he would just buy people off and buy things off. And he goes, Vince, he's got this idea. So I was sworn to secrecy, could not tell Ted. And I'm just starting there, so I'm sure as hell not going to breathe a word to this because I don't know if this is a test for me to say, hey, tell Bruce the gimmick, tell him don't tell Ted, and then we'll see if Ted knows. I had no idea. I just kept my mouth shut. So, but the deal was actually in the scheme of things, when they brought Ted up, before Vince told him the idea, Ted had to agree to come.
Yeah, and so what we hear from Ted is that it took 2 face-to-face meetings. So, he asked him to come up, and he doesn't reveal what it is when he actually goes up the first time. And he says something like, it's never been done before. And in our business, that's really saying how special it is because everything's been done. And we say that all the time in 2017, but even 30 years ago, they're saying everything's been done before. Everything's just repackaged or rehashed or rebuilt, but this is really unique and never been done before. And he wouldn't give him the idea until he had his word that he was coming on board. So now, after promising, I'll tell you face to face, Vince is backing up a little bit and saying, nope, I need your word. You're coming on board. So Ted says, I need some time to think. And this seems like, and this is from Ted's account, but I've heard this from the Road Warriors too. They're all in a room making this pitch, and all of a sudden now Vince gets called away. So Vince is out of the room now, and it's just Ted and Pat. And Pat says something like, think about this. If Vince could put the tights on and climb in the ring, what he wants to do with you is what he would do for himself. It's his idea, and he created it. He's going to do all he can to make it work. And you heard something similar where when he meets with the Road Warriors, he gets called away for a few minutes and just thrown on the desk in front of them in plain sight where they can see very easily are royalty amounts for checks to Roddy Piper and other guys, just to kind of give them an idea of what the money is. Is that a Vince MO to get called away for a minute and either have a private conversation with a confidant to establish some trust and some commonality, or to leave some pay stubs laying around, some sort of, they feel like they got a little something extra. It wasn't just the dog and pony show from Vince. There was something, okay, that was all the work, but this is real, because I've heard a variation of that over and over.
I think it's more coincidence and people tying it all in, but there was definitely, if, for example, if I had a relationship with someone, then by all means he would make sure that I was there for that meeting and that I had time with them alone to give a sales pitch and what have you, and reinforce his sales pitch. But probably more coincidence than anything, him being called away. But yeah, definitely. If you had a relationship with somebody, if JR had a relationship with somebody, you use that and have them give their pitch off to the side, and then Vince comes in and Vince gives the pitch, and then you try and close the deal.
So he goes home and makes a call to Terry Funk. And Terry says, if Vince McMahon has an idea like that for you, pack your bags and don't look back. So,
pack your bags, Theodore. Don't look back.
So his wife makes the second trip with him, and this time it's the full dog and pony show. They're doing the dinner thing. They're going to the theater shows and the fancy car and the chauffeur, and they're staying at the Helmsley Palace, just really trying to pile on and impress the wife. And he meets with Vince, and Vince lays out the $1 Million Man gimmick. But first says, now that you've committed to me, do you want to call Crockett or do you want me to? Are you there for that conversation where Vince offers to call Crockett and tell him?
No, I wasn't there.
Well, Ted says that Vince said, okay, now before I tell you the gimmick, and I have your word that you're coming, do you want to call Crockett or do you want me to? And Ted says, I'll make the call. So Ted makes the call right then. And once Vince knows for sure he's just given his notice, then he tells him about the $1 Million Man gimmick. Ted is super excited about it. Tells his wife, pinch me. And all these years later, he still credits Vince McMahon with giving him the biggest break of his career and treating him better than any promoter ever. Before we get into some of the specifics, let's just gloss over this. Do you remember ever seeing any jealousy from any of the other boys with the way $1 Million Man had to kind of live the gimmick? So where some of the other guys are piling in the cars, he's got a limo.
I tell you, it's funny. We all expected that, and I dare say Ted expected that. But I didn't see it. I think Ted was one of those talents that everyone else respected and they looked up to, and it wasn't some green guy with no experience that has a look or has something that all of a sudden just got this great gimmick. Ted was a second-generation wrestler who had worked his way up through the ranks, who deserved everything he got, and was in a position to finally reap the rewards. And I think for the most part, people respected him and said, you know what? Goddamn, he deserves it. You know, Hogan deserves it. DiBiase deserves it.
So let's talk about that. You mentioned Hogan. DiBiase puts over that when he first sees Hogan here, Hogan makes some sort of remark to him in the back. Hey, time for me to pay you back, because he remembered how Ted had carried him to a good match at MSG in 79. And obviously when he's coming into the WWF in 87, Hogan's on top in a big way. They're in different worlds, but he thinks it means, that it meant a lot to him, Ted, I mean, that Hogan would go out of his way to come over and say something like that. What was your perception of the way DiBiase would be brought in? Was the plan all along before he actually makes the debut, hey, we're putting him with Hogan right away? Or do you remember what some of the preliminary ideas, beyond just the character and the vignettes, but as far as a program?
There weren't that. It's funny. It was a different time and place. You had, when DiBiase came in, you had one big event. That was Wrestlemania.
Right.
That was it. So everything else were programs that would main event in individual live event markets. So a program, if you will, an angle would be something that could last 6 months before you made it all the way around the country with that match. So when they would kind of pair guys up, they did it for that long a term. If you were in the New York market, sometimes you'd have to figure out 3 different matches to go around the horn with them. But it was different programming at that time. So there wasn't as much thought to that as there was, let's get the character over first. And the initial thought with the vignettes, the $1 Million Man vignettes, that Joel Watts was brought in to bring a lot of that to the WWF. And Joel did those first vignettes. We did them, worked with Joel. We did those in Dallas, the very first ones. Just because here's how funny shit was. We shot a lot of those $1 Million Man vignettes in Dallas because that's where Joel was living at the time.
Right.
And so he had a lot of connections in Dallas, and so we just shot him in Dallas. Instead of doing it in New York or doing it somewhere else, is later on, I didn't do what was convenient. I did what was right for the gimmick. But
let's talk about the vignettes. I think one of the first ones is him riding in the back of a limo, and he's introducing himself and flashing a big stack of $100 bills and talking about all the things he can buy. And then he gets a paper cut on his finger with the money and has Virgil take him to the emergency room, and the receptionist won't let him see a doctor, so he gives her $300 to get some attention, and then finishes the bit with, everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man. Was that the first one you remember?
That is the first one, yeah. That was the introduction.
So whose idea was the line at the end? That seems like something you guys would have talked about. I know back then there weren't strict scripts like we experience today, but how much of that was freestyling, and was that line pre-planned as like the hook for all these vignettes?
The $1 Million Man, everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man. That was straight from Vince. That was Vince's stuff. That was the $1 Million Man shtick. Everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man. And later on, because Ted and I were friends, we went way back. I love Ted's laugh, and we incorporated that into it. And we just would incorporate little things, little Ted-isms, and then as we got to know Vince more, we incorporate, Vince-isms into that.
Now, it's worth mentioning, he's signing here right after you do. So that's probably what, April of 87?
I signed in, I went in April of 87, and Teddy was right there on my heels.
He actually appears for the first time on May 15th, 87 at a house show in Houston, Texas. He went to the ring, didn't wrestle, but had a confrontation with the one-man gang. It's Houston. It's right after you start. You got to be at that show, right? Yeah,
I was definitely there. It was the first Houston wrestling WWF promoted event.
We're going to talk about that one day. Who knows when? That maybe when we do a host choice, because Houston wrestling's never going back on the fucking bowl. That thing's been slaughtered like more times than Auburn in bowl games. Talk to me about this.
What the hell does that mean?
Well, a couple of people heard it and they're fired up about it. Roll Tide. Do you remember specifically when he makes this debut here? Because obviously there's no television of this. That's a house show. How's he dressed?
Yeah, it was TV.
Okay, how's the $1 Million Man dressed on this show?
In a
blazer,
kind of like a silver and black blazer. Yep.
Okay. There is video out there of you interviewing DiBiase on the podium. He had just wrestled a match with Hulk Hogan, and it was count out. Why the hell were you there interviewing?
Well, that was back when I was that was post August of, I think, I was a play-by-play guy in Houston. We taped all the shows there because part of the deal with Houston and WWF was that we would do a Houston-specific television show, and I was doing play-by-play and also the host of the show.
He ends up wrestling and losing to the one-man gang on a few house shows before appearing on TV as the $1 Million Man. I'm curious, if he's coming in with this big push, why is he losing to the gang on a few house shows? Is this a Vince-ism to have him come in and lose early? I don't understand. If he's coming in as a top guy, why is he? And I know one-man gang's over at this time, but help me understand the mentality behind, we've got this great gimmick for you. Go lose to one-man gang.
Well, part of it, and I'm guessing at this point because I was not involved in it, and
can I guess?
Can
I guess?
Sure.
I would guess, since he's coming in with this gimmick that people perceive as going to have a bunch of heat, let's show the locker room that he's one of the boys. He's not a prima donna. And he obviously gets along good with one-man gang. They work together in Texas. Let's let him lose to gang to show everybody that he's not going to be Hogan 2.
Well, I would venture to guess that the markets that they worked were probably traditional, either Mid-South markets or places where DiBiase had been over before as a babyface.
Right.
So they probably brought him in as a babyface in that role, and Gang was being groomed at that time to go with Hogan. So that's probably why.
So help me understand, we're going to talk about this gimmick a lot, because it's one of the most over gimmicks in history. Would you agree with that, Bruce?
God, yes.
When you hear Vince describe the gimmick, let me hear what that sounds like. I know you told me a minute ago that Patterson was the first one to talk about it, but as you're producing some of these skits, or as you're hearing from Vince about the character, I want you to kind of recreate the way Vince would describe this gimmick.
Well, hang on. Let me try and do this a different way. Vince and I at this time are making a lot of trips back and forth from New York to Houston, trying to shore up everything between the WWF and the Houston wrestling office. And Vince has pitched, the $1 Million Man gimmick. We have started to produce the vignettes, what have you. And have I told the story about the guy smoking in first class on the show yet?
No, you have not.
Okay. Then let me tell it to you that way.
Yeah, do it.
Where the light bulb went off on me and I truly got the $1 Million Man and the whole feeling behind it. So this is back 1987. There was still smoking on planes. The first class section sometimes would only be the first row, or be two rows. The first row would be non-smoking. The second row would be smoking. So go figure. And Vince is notoriously anti-smoking and hates cigarette smoke and doesn't like cigarettes anywhere around him, what have you. And we're flying back from Houston back to New York. We are seated in seats 1A and 1B in first class. That is a non-smoking section. However, seats 2A and 2B directly behind us is smoking. And as we take off and they clear whatever altitude they clear, the no smoking sign turns off in the cabin, and in the sections where you're allowed to smoke, now you can light up. And we're flying along, and the guy sitting back in 2B takes his cigarette out, lights a cigarette. And he starts to smoke his cigarette, and Vince turns around and goes, "Hey, pal, I'll give you $100, put that cigarette out." And the guy says, "No, man, I'm good. I want to have my cigarette. I'm in the smoking section. I want to have my cigarette." "Give you $200, pal. Put the cigarette out." The guy keeps smoking. Just says, "Look, I want to have my cigarette. Okay, I'm fine. I paid for this." He goes, "Give you $500, pal. Put the cigarette out. All right." The guy says, "Hey, man, I paid for my seat. I just want to smoke my cigarette." He goes, "I'll pay for your seat and I'll still give you another $500. Just put the cigarette out." And the guy finally just puts the cigarette out, and Vince is peeling off hundreds to give this guy money for putting his cigarette out. And I just looked down and go, "Oh, fuck, man. You are the $1 Million Man." And that's when it all clicked on me, because it was, everybody's got a price, pal. Goddamn. Doesn't matter. Everything's for sale, and everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man. You understand now? And it clicked. But that was Vince in real life. That was real life shit that, actually fucking happened.
I want everybody to pause the show right now and post on social media that Something to Wrestle With is the greatest fucking wrestling podcast of all time. And it's because of stuff like that. Where else are you going to get that? Hit the subscribe button, leave us a review. Yes, I'm plugging us right in the middle of a great story, because you're not going to get that anywhere else. Thank you for sharing that, dude. That was awesome.
But that was one of those surreal moments where I'm sitting there and just like, holy shit. This really fucking happened. And I would tell that story later, but that was the example. Whenever I did DiBiase vignettes, that was the example and how he did it. And it wasn't a work. It wasn't a, hey, let's show Bruce what I can do now, goddammit. It was no. Hey, motherfucker, you're smoking? I don't want you to smoke. What's it going to take? You got a price, pal. And he got to the point where the guy just put his cigarette out because he didn't want to fuck with the crazy guy sitting in 2B.
Crazy indeed. So what was it about DiBiase that made Vince think this guy can do it?
Because Teddy was so fucking smooth, man. There's something about him. DiBiase has an aura. He just has a finesse. When Ted would walk into a bar, even back in the day, that son of a bitch would walk into a bar and every head in the place would turn because he looked like somebody. He carried himself like somebody. And he had that intangible it. He was special. He could deliver in the ring. He could talk. And he wasn't afraid of shit. So you just, when you say, what was it? It was it. It was that just intangible it that made Ted stand out. And then the bell rang and he could
awesome.
Deliver.
Yeah. So hypothetically, let's say things go a little different. And I know you're going to say, oh, I don't know, but I just want you to play along in freestyle. Let's say that when Ted is meeting with Crockett and he agrees to Luger money and he agrees to let him go to Japan, that Ted goes out to the ring that night, works his match, and when he comes back through the curtain, Crockett says, I'm going to give you everything you asked for, but I need you to sign right now. What if Ted had signed right then? Would somebody else have gotten the $1 Million Man gimmick, or would Vince have just shelved it until DiBiase was available?
I think Vince would have shelved it until the right guy was available.
Venture a guess, if it wasn't DiBiase, just freestyle, play along, who would it have been? Who could have been someone to fit? Because here's the thing, a lot of times you've got on the show here and denied that such a box of gimmicks exists. But in this particular case, you really do have a gimmick and you're looking for the guy. So if it wasn't DiBiase, who might it have been?
Flair would have been perfect for it.
I think that's the obvious answer.
It's the only answer. Yeah. If it had been pre-1985 Gino Hernandez.
Well, there you go. But he had the
Gino Hernandez would have been a better $1 Million Man than Ted DiBiase because he was a $1 Million Man.
Just in the way he was arrogant and carried himself and behaved.
Yes.
Well, Rick would have been awesome as that, and it's often been rumored that SummerSlam 88, he was supposed to be the guy on the first Brother Love show on pay-per-view instead of Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Had he jumped and DiBiase not came over a year prior, hypothetically, SummerSlam 88 could have been where we saw the debut of the $1 Million Man Ric Flair on the Brother Love show.
Could have been.
Isn't that crazy how just a couple of things different happen? Like, what if DiBiase really would have signed that night in Fort Worth, and then they put him with Flair? He becomes one of the top heels. Flair has a falling out when the whole, belt, WCW, all of that stuff happens, and says, I'm out of here. DiBiase stays, is the top guy, and then DiBiase is the WW or NWA WCW champion, and the $1 Million Man Ric Flair is on the Brother Love show.
What a crazy world. But then I wouldn't have had my buddy to hang out with me and travel with me in my early days in WWF, because DiBiase and I just moved from one place to another, and he was my traveling buddy up there too.
So DiBiase liked to party once upon a time.
Yeah. It's not a secret now. Ted's told this story all over the place. Ted was a lot of fun. I had a blast day. Back in the day, Ted DiBiase and Brother Love knew how to have a good time. I know you're laughing at that going, fuck, you're boring as hell now.
Oh, you are. People don't believe how boring you and I are in real life sometimes. Let's talk about some of the other skits, and then we're going to talk about something everybody wants to talk about. One of the other skits was he buys his way into a public pool by bribing the manager to kick all the kids out. And he kicks all the kids out, and then he's got the pool all to himself. Did you shoot that in Dallas as well?
Yes, we did.
Any memories about shooting that skit or the emergency room visit?
It's funny. I remember the paper cut in the limousine. I don't remember the emergency room itself, but I remember vividly the swimming pool, the public swimming pool deal. We actually shot that at a public swimming pool, obviously, but the little kids up against the fence, that was just priceless. I remember afterwards we're sitting there and I'm looking at Joel and I said, you know, for a guy with all this money, everybody's got a price. You'd have thought that he might have picked a nicer fucking pool than this piece of shit.
I was thinking the same thing watching that. Like, I mean, who's swimming in that? He buys his way into a restaurant. He goes into a restaurant. There's no reservation. Hands the guy some money. Takes somebody's table, has a table right away. That feels like a Vince McMahon move.
Vince McMahon taught me that move, as a matter of fact.
It still works in 2017.
Goddamn, pal, go duke the fucking maitre d'. What do you got on you? That's not gonna get it. God damn, here. And slip me 100 and we'd get a table. But Vince taught me how to do that too.
Those guys pay attention to watches too. He buys his way into the honeymoon suite at a booked hotel. Anything stick out to you about the restaurant or the booked hotel? Any little funny anecdotes you could pitch us about those two? The girl that played the part of the bride in the honeymoon suite, we didn't smarten her up to a lot other than, you know, that's going to happen. And she just said to DiBiase, God, what an asshole. And we thought, okay, great. This is going to work. Absolutely.
You know, it was good times.
Any other vignettes?
We shot that at the Embassy Suites in Dallas.
Is it still there now?
It is. Yes, it is. And it's still I don't know if it's Embassy Suites, maybe another suite hotel, but it was the big pink Embassy Suites there in Dallas.
Any other vignettes stick out to you that maybe we missed?
Ooh. Well, the crazy thing about it is when Ted came in and we started having his TV matches and he started wrestling on TV, the reaction wasn't one of heat and they didn't hate him. And we did shit in the arenas where you'd have people come up and kiss his feet. Rob Van Dam is a fan.
Yeah, so let's mention
got
that.
in and kicks his feet.
You're getting people to participate in silly stuff. The most famous one is when you guys had a small black child onto
okay, but hang on, because I want to get to why we did that.
Yes.
Because we were doing it with real people and taking people out of the crowd and having them do shit, and they would do things and Ted would pay them. Well, after a while, they start cheering DiBiase. Why not? He's giving people money.
Wow, there you go.
So it's like everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man. Well, fuck yeah. Hey, here's my price. Okay, here you go. So he's paying people off. And the psychology of it was really simple. What's there to hate?
Right.
That's when we came up with the thing for the kid and the basketball.
Whose idea was that?
What if he doesn't pay off? What if they do what he says he's going to do? Or they do what he asks them to do? Or he fucks them out of it somehow? Then they're going to hate him. And what if he does it to a kid? The Vincent's little kid.
So the thought was, hey, it's not just enough to humiliate them because people are still cheering. They're still in.
They're still getting paid.
Yeah. So we've got to screw him out of it. So we're not only now does he have a bunch of cash and likes to humiliate people, but he's a dick too. He's greedy and he's a liar and he's a cheat and he's a thief and blah, blah, blah.
We forgot the simplest ingredient of an asshole heel. They lie, they cheat, they steal.
Right.
So the time came and we came up with the deal for the basketball. And I want to say all this came out of Vince's head because he's warped. And the idea, you know, is Teddy's doing this thing.
No.
I'm
I'm going to need to hear Vince pitch this idea. In my head, he calls you at 2 a.m. and says, "Goddamn, pal, I got it."
Well, no, we're sitting there and he's like, "Teddy, here's what we're going to do. Pick a kid out. We'll get a nice little kid, innocent looking, about, I don't know, 5, 6, 8 years old. You know, it doesn't matter. And you get him up, find the cutest little bastard you can find. And all he's got to do is bounce a basketball 10 times. And you show him, you let him practice, make sure he can do it. And we count along. And he gets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the whole crowd's behind him. And you get to 8, 9, and whoops! You kick the ball out from under his hands. Well, what happens when you don't do the job? You don't get the money. And we're all like going, that's fucking great, man. And when he did it, and obviously the little kid doesn't know, kid thinks he's going to get $500 for bouncing a ball. Fuck, he does that every day.
Right.
And he gets 9, Teddy kicks the ball. Whoops. Well, kid, you know what they say, you don't do the job, you don't get the money. And the little kid starts crying, man. He gets down off and runs to his mom.
So the kid was not a plant.
Oh, 100% not a plant.
And the kid nobody went and paid him after the fact.
Who said, well, okay, what? Yeah, sure.
Good. I've always wondered that, and I was like, I hope they still paid his family.
Okay, goddamn, you fucking
Marks. Yeah, I got it.
Yes, we paid the little kid afterwards.
That's good.
But it was classic, man. He was crying and little tears down his little face, and mom was just so disgusted with us. How can you do that? Like, he's a heel. He's a heel. Goddamn.
So another skit you guys do, you call a kid up to do 15 push-ups for $300. The kid can only do 10. So Ted says you do your best, but doing your best isn't good enough for the $1 Million Man. You don't get the money. Also not a plant?
Nope.
What about the woman on all fours who's told to bark like a dog for $300, which is basically a slow night at the Conradison? Instead of barking, though, she keeps saying rough, so she doesn't get paid either. To me, that's a rib, right? I mean, come on.
No, that one was a makeup artist that we had in that town.
And then, of course, one time after a match, everybody has heard this story by now. He takes his boot off in the ring and calls a young fan into the ring to kiss his foot for money. And that fan became Rob Van Dam. And that was probably one of the earlier skits because he's still paying him for doing these embarrassing things, right? Right.
Yes. That was when we realized that, hey, man, no, it's not working. Because they were happy. Shit, man, everybody's raising their hand.
Right. When this is going on, this feels like a real big, heat-seeking segment. Was there ever any worry for Ted's safety? Or, this wasn't like a riotous thing, right?
No, I was debating whether or not to tell the story, but I won't.
No, you can't do that. You're just amongst your friends. Over 250,000 people aren't listening right now. It's just me and you. Go ahead.
Well, no, and again, keep in mind this was not obviously not factual or anything like that. It was one of those crazy surreal moments. We were doing media, and it was just myself, Ted, and Virgil, And this guy, it was early morning at a radio station, and the guy comes in. Ted and I get in the back of the limo, and Virgil goes up to the front. Virgil would always ride up with the limo driver. When Virgil gets in the front seat, Ted and I are in the back. And this guy comes up to the limo and hands Ted something to sign. He says, "Hey, would you sign this for me?" He says, "Sure." So Ted signs it and hands it back to the guy. The guy hands it back to Ted and says, "What do you think?" He says, What's that?" He says, "Well, look at it." And it was a picture of a girl. And Ted says, "Nice. Here you go."
Oh, a picture of a naked girl?
No, just a picture of a girl.
Okay.
And next thing I know, the guy knocks the shit out of Ted, sitting in the limo.
Wow.
And he says, "That's my wife. You slept with my wife, you son of a bitch." And we're looking at each other like, "What, did that just happen?" And we jump out, and Virgil, of course, Johnny on the spot, wasn't there when $1 Million Man needed his bodyguard. And Virgil jumps out and grabs the guy and got a few punches in. And Ted's like going, "Hey, man, nah, just, leave him alone. He didn't hurt me." It just was like, what the hell? But there was that kind of crazy shit that would happen sometimes. And for some reason, Teddy and I always found ourselves in some kind of crazy shit.
Hang on now. You're skipping a valuable part of the story. Did Ted get them draws?
No, he had no idea who the hell it was.
Well, doesn't mean he didn't. Not like you could be showing a picture of all of yours either and remember them all.
So anyway, there was this time that
I love this show.
it was a different time, different place, folks. That was, like, as you said, many, many years ago, and Teddy has talked about his transgressions and weaknesses and all that good stuff, and I love Theodore to death.
Well, let's talk about these vignettes. Is there anything else that we can kind of put a bow on here?
No, I'm sure you'll think of something that'll make me come back to them, but they were a lot of fun. I mean, it was one of those. It was my first. That was my first vignettes in the WWF. Joel Watts,
right?
I just started and came up with Joel Watts, and let's take a time out right there.
Joel Watts came up with you from Texas as well at the same time, right?
Yes.
Tell everybody who's not familiar with Joel Watts who that is.
Joel Watts is Bill Watts' adopted son, Joel, and Joel did the television production for UWF in Mid-South. He was the director of the show. He also produced it. And Joel was responsible for a lot of those early Rock and Roll Express videos, the Freebird videos. And he did a lot of just cutting edge stuff. He's a great producer, very creative. And I missed working with Joel, man. He was a blast. And we both came up at the same time in April of 1987. And then Joel left in January of 88.
This is
maybe even December of 87, he might have left.
I mean, really process what a time in the business this is. And you've got Bill Watts' son leaving the territory, going to work for Vince McMahon with one of the former office folks from Paul Bosch's territory. And they're bringing along the hottest free agent, and they give him the $1 Million Man gimmick, and Vince trusts these two guys to go put these vignettes together. That situation would never happen in the WWE in 2017.
Bizarro land, isn't it?
I mean, just like if we had to make an analogy and draw a comparison, there's no scenario that Matt Hardy, who is obviously really over right now, is going to have an opportunity to go shoot his own stuff with Borash and David Sahadi for WWE, and then it just be on TV and him being in a top featured position, just cold like that.
And add to that, I was 24 years old.
Yeah, it just gets crazier the more you talk about it.
Joel I guess Joel was about the same age. I'm trying to think. But yeah, we were kids.
One of the other pieces of the act that we haven't talked about is the idea of stuffing $100 bills into the mouth of his beaten, unconscious opponent. Whose idea was that? Do you recall?
I think it was Vince's. Just kind of a touch, but I remember it came up in a production meeting, and I want to say that was Vince's idea.
When did Ted's laugh first become part of the permanent piece of the act? Do you recall?
Well, I know whenever I would do shit with Ted, I would always emphasize the laugh, because I would do the vignettes for Ted as Ted.
Right.
And so when I would do them, of course, I would always overact and overemphasize, and everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man. And I would do it over the top for him. So Ted would get to the point where he would accentuate the same way I would, and then he would do the laugh probably over the top at the end. And then it just became such a assholeian part of that character that it was a signature. And the other important part that we kind of left out was the leeway that Ted had in real life. You know, you talk about danger. Was Ted ever in danger and things of that nature? Was that with that gimmick, Vince gave Ted the leeway that if he was ever in a public place and needed to demonstrate that he was indeed the $1 Million Man,
he had petty cash,
then he should do so. He had petty cash, plus he had an American Express that he could use, whatever it took to, if he needed to pay somebody off, if he needed to do so. You know, $1 Million Man didn't wait in line. $1 Million Man flew first class, always had a stretch limo. He would take that in, he would walk in with receipts and get paid that day at the house shows. So it was a great gimmick, man. You know, he needed to pick up the tab at a bar, he picked it up.
And do you remember any sort of, obviously the WWF's on fire here, and this is Vince's personal idea, so he's all over it. But do you remember there ever being any pushback about, you know, we covered it before, where Sonny would turn in receipts where she was having $90 breakfasts every day, and Jim Ross questioning her about it? That's a different time, and that's a different gimmick. It's not for business necessarily. So.
Yeah, well, Ted didn't really abuse it. So it was, it wasn't something that he abused, and Vince was cool with it.
Well, let's talk about somebody who we haven't yet discussed on the show here, and I've been waiting for this one, and you know what's coming. When is the decision made to put Virgil with the $1 Million Man?
Oh, that was day one. I mean, that was right from the beginning, because he had to have a manservant.
So along with the idea was, not only is we're going to do these vignettes and we want you to spend lavishly and you're going to be a super heel, rich asshole. But, oh, by the way, you need a manservant too.
Correct. And I have a picture somewhere that is positively priceless of Virgil, because if you remember, you back in those very first vignettes, he was wearing like the all gold and all silver, skin tight suits.
Yep.
And we were ribbing him on the first day that you look like the FTD florist. All you needed were little wings on your head. So no shit, man. When we were doing the restaurant vignettes, right next door was a florist. And right outside the florist was the FTD man. And Steve Taylor, who was a photographer, was shooting pictures. And we said, hey, Virg, just scoot back a little bit, man. Move over here, and we just need to get a couple shots of you. And we shot these great pictures of Virgil with the FTD florist that was absolutely priceless. I have that somewhere, but who knows where.
Lots of different rumors and innuendo about Virgil. Ted says that he first met Mike Jones in Vince's office, and he thinks that one of the Samoans recommended him. Do you recall? Is that how that went down? He was trained by the Samoans or recommended by the Samoans?
He was trained by Alpha, and he worked as Soul Train Jones. ST Jones, Soul Train Jones.
Ted described Mike Jones as being very capable and able and loyal and would do anything asked of him. He had nothing but really, really nice things to say about him. But I know you're going to deny this, so let me just get it out of the way. How did you guys come up with the name Virgil?
Joel Watts actually came up with that name.
DiBiase says that Bobby Heenan pitched it at dinner almost as a joke, but everybody loved it, and it stuck. Now, what's your recollection of how Joel Watts came up with it?
We're sitting trying to come up with a name for the manservant, and Joel pitched Virgil.
And everybody erupts in laughter?
What's funny about that?
How many other Virgils do you know?
Didn't he look like a Virgil?
I don't know what a Virgil looks like, baby.
He looked like DiBiase's bodyguard manservant.
Listen, fucker. Why won't you just admit this is a rib?
Look, ribs rule, and ribs still rule, and there's a lot of ribomania going on. Well, that's not a rib.
How can you sit there and say that this is not a rib? There's one Virgil known in wrestling before he was given this name.
No, there was a Dusty known in wrestling.
Okay. Why are you doing this?
It was a good name. It worked.
What would another name have been?
We needed
what were
one
the other
name.
names that were suggested?
Oh God, I don't know. Leroy.
Racist.
No, you asked me. That is honest to God one of the names that was suggested.
Talk me through Virgil.
Joel mentioned it. People liked it, so he went with it. The same way we came up with Bastion Booger. Like an idiot, I said, what about Bastion Booger? I love it. And all of a sudden had a Bastion Booger on our hands.
There's,
sometimes you just say shit and it sticks.
I want you to get in that microphone that you've tried to eat 3 times so far today. And I want you to say,
I've done better today, haven't I?
You have. Clearly for the record, Virgil was not a rib. I want you to lie to our audience right now.
Why would you want me to lie to our audience?
Naming Mike Jones Virgil, the manservant for the $1 Million Man, was not a rib. Go ahead, do it.
Virgil's not a rib. He was a manservant for Ted DiBiase.
Naming him Virgil, not a rib on Dusty Rhodes.
Something to wrestle with, folks.
All right, here's something else to wrestle with. Message board BS. I can't believe I'm even going to say this.
Come on, go ahead.
Virgil was known amongst the boys for something else. I don't know another way to say that. This feels really weird to even talk about, but I got multiple DMs. Hey, you going to ask about
Virgil's Porter Wagner?
Virgil's gimmick? You got any stories about Virgil's gimmick?
I'm not going to sit here and talk about Virgil's gimmick on our podcast, but it was huge. Probably still is. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Did Pat
huge?
Where was Pat Patterson on Virgil? Was he a fan?
I guess so. I think everybody was a fan of Virgil. He did a good job. Alrighty then.
DiBiase would go on to get a few count-out wins over Hulk on house shows. And we referenced one of those interview segments with Bruce earlier. It is on YouTube if you'd like to check it out. And then towards the end of 87, so this is, he makes the debut in May of 87. So through the summer, we start to really get this over. But I'm curious because Survivor Series 1987 happens, and DiBiase is not on the card. And I thought that was weird that this is the first non-WrestleMania pay-per-view. It's just a few months after he's brought in, and he's not there. In the aftermath, of course, we would set up what we're really here to talk about, probably one of the more defining moments in Ted's career. But why wasn't he figured in to Survivor Series 87? Does that ring a bell to you? Do you know why?
No, it really doesn't. I don't remember.
It's the very first Survivor Series. It's in Richfield. And I can't believe this is a thing. 21,000 people there. And one of the more over gimmicks that's, you know, in the main event position, it's not there. And I was fascinated by that. Anyway, moving on. What they set up is something we're going to talk about in long form at some point. But the $1 Million Man acquires Andre the Giant's contract from Bobby the Brain Heenan, and then sets Andre up to win the WWF World Title from Hulk Hogan, and then just give it to him. And on what is probably one of the most famous gimmicks, or finishes, or angles, or concepts of anything ever in wrestling, is what they do on the main event here. That happens February 5th, 1988 on the NBC network. We're going to cover that show in great detail. This is just so everybody is kind of on the same page. This is where Hogan loses the belt to Andre the Giant. Andre then awards the belt, which he calls the Tag Team Championship, to Ted DiBiase. And I
think in French there was a translation problem there.
And they do this with the brand new what Belt Fan Dan, Leather by Dan, would call the Winged Eagle belt, which had just made its debut on this particular show. And they do a spot here where Hogan wasn't really pinned. There was a second referee, an evil referee, and it's revealed that there are two identical twins. And of course the WWF spins it that the $1 Million Man must have paid to have reconstructive plastic surgery on this other referee's face, which is just genius, especially for 1988. And we're going to explore that in long form another time. But just real quick here, let's touch on this. Whose idea was this angle? And did everybody know this was fucking gold right away?
As far as I know, it was Vince's idea. I didn't even know the finish that night, and I was at the gorilla position timing the show out.
And you didn't know?
Nope. Vince asked me if I wanted to know what the finish was, and I said, nope. Does it matter? He said, nope. And I didn't want to know.
So was this live?
Yes.
Live. Your memories of Andre calling the belt the Tag Team Championship?
I remember that vividly. Because all he had to get out was, I surrender the championship. That's what we wanted him to get out.
Right.
But yeah, that's Andre.
Andre's obviously physically limited at this point. So there's lots of physicality, with Ted and Virgil. Of course, Hulk beats them both up. I just love
this. Hogan has to pose, pal.
Yeah, there you go.
Hogan must pose.
Do you remember which ref was actually in the ring? I don't remember off the top of my head. I haven't watched this in years. Was it Dave or Earl Hebner?
Earl.
So this is awesome. Maybe one of the best angles ever. We'll get to it soon enough. In the following days at house shows, DiBiase was wearing the belt and was announced as the WWF champion. And he even defended the title against Bam Bam Bigelow. In another match, he teamed with Andre to wrestle Hogan and Bigelow. And he wore the belt that night and was announced as the WWF World Champion. And this is all built up to set up Wrestlemania 4, which we're obviously going to cover here. But before we get too deep into this, was the plan at this point, when you do this angle, always to set up a tournament? for WrestleMania 4? Like when this match goes down, the plan is this is going to set up a tournament.
Yeah, the plan was all the way back, even before Survivor Series, to set up a tournament for WrestleMania 4.
DiBiase believes the rumor that we've all heard for years and years and years, which we've addressed in an earlier show, but we should just cover it again now here, because it's so critical to the rest of the story, that the Macho Man was supposed to become the Intercontinental title holder. Honky Tonk Man did not want to lose it to him on Saturday night's main event. So instead, they kept that belt on Honky, and to pacify Macho Man, they thrust him into what would have been DiBiase's spot, winning the world title at WrestleMania 4 in this tournament. And DiBiase has gone on record and said, I was told I was winning the belt at WrestleMania. And then he was told that the $1 million belt was created because why would the $1 million man need that belt when he could just create his own? Much nicer, much more expensive, much more lavish belt. But of course, in the business, the belt is a status symbol that you're the top guy. And he felt like he was given that $1 million belt just to pacify him for not being world champion. So what's real? What happened? Clear up the rumor and innuendo about all things WrestleMania 4.
Well, as I've said before, I'm sure that Ted was definitely considered for that, but the WWF was traditionally babyface territory, and they always had babyface champions, and I don't think that Vince wanted to experiment with it at that time, and he kind of had the perfect storm of everything else going on. The decision was made to be Randy, but in my opinion, I think that the $1 million belt, for heat purposes of Ted going around with his own championship, creating his own championship, was more heat for the $1 million man and did more for that character than being the WWF champion. And I do believe that.
Well, I don't guess you can argue that, because he really did get it over and it worked. Do you believe that Ted was told he was going to be the WWF champion, or do you think DiBiase's full of it there?
He may have been told that. He may have been told that, hey, we're thinking about putting the championship on you. But I think that sometimes guys hear what they want to hear, and somebody's saying, hey, we're thinking about maybe putting the championship on you. They hear, hey, we're going to put the title on you.
Did you hear he was going to be champ?
Never.
When did you hear that the plan was Macho? Do you remember?
After February.
Post Market Square Arena, double referee, Andre wins the belt, gives it to DiBiase. That's when you hear Macho Man's going to get it.
Yep. That's about the right time frame. But I knew it wasn't going to be Ted.
Why?
Hence the whole idea, and even the whole idea behind WrestleMania, frankly, was the rubber match with Hulk and Andre. The idea was WrestleMania 3, Hogan goes over. He beats Andre. Survivor Series, Andre beats Hogan. And then you have the match in February, the main event, the live match where the title is held up. You go to WrestleMania and you do it again so that you can come back, full circle and be able to get one where Hogan finally triumphs again and saves the day. But Andre's health wasn't the best, and it just the attraction, I think, had kind of lost its appeal. And if you would ask me, you say, well, goddamn, how does that lose its appeal? To me, it lost its appeal by Andre not beating Hogan at Survivor Series, by pinning him 1, 2, 3 and beating him and leaving with his hand up, and Hogan decimated at Survivor Series. But that's just the old school in me, difference of opinion. I made my case and was told Hogan had to pose.
I I struggle with the timeline a little bit here because the Intercontinental match that people remember from Saturday night's main event with Savage and Honky Tonk was in October of 87. And you're saying that in February.
I'm saying when I knew that Randy was going to be the guy was February.
Okay. Is it fair to say that DiBiase in late 87, early 88 is the most over heel?
Yes.
Why wouldn't the natural deal be DiBiase just keep the belt there and then they set up Wrestlemania 4? Fuck this tournament. And just do DiBiase Hogan on top?
Well, that probably would have made a lot of sense. But again, that's not the way that territory had traditionally ever been booked. I came from...
Now, let me be clear here. I know you're saying it's a babyface territory. I'm saying let DiBiase keep the belt and then lose it at WrestleMania.
I hear what you're saying. But Vince didn't see it that way. Vince saw that you always had to have the big babyface defending the title.
Not
now,
winning it.
In order to get to a new babyface champion, you got to beat him at some fucking point.
Right.
So, yes, it would have made sense that, and frankly, would have been, in my opinion, a much stronger attraction.
Right.
But Vince had in his head, he wanted to get Hogan Andre again. That was the thinking behind it. At that point, the championship was almost secondary to getting another WrestleMania one-on-one Hogan and Andre.
Is there any truth to speculation that Hogan says no yob to DiBiase here?
No.
I'm just kind of curious what happens to DiBiase here in your perspective, because he's in the main event of WrestleMania 4. He loses to Macho Man. They get their big babyface moment we've talked about before. Hogan, Savage, Miss Elizabeth, Macho Man's the champ. We go into SummerSlam 88. It's the Mega Bucks versus the Mega Powers. It's Andre and DiBiase again, main eventing the very first SummerSlam. So it's a big deal. So DiBiase still figured in a big way. And then we go to Survivor Series, and at Survivor Series that year, again, DiBiase's in the main event. It's the Mega Powers, in the main event. And on the opposite side, we've got, the Twin Towers, Ted DiBiase, Haku, and Cock-a-Doodle-Doo Man. But then this starts to get interesting to me. We go to 89 and we get to the Royal Rumble. It's the very end of the Royal Rumble. DiBiase is the last person eliminated, and he's eliminated by Big John Studd, who then leaves the promotion later that year. What's the thought in not having DiBiase win the Rumble? Why go Big John Studd in January of 89?
Because Vince saw big things for Big John Studd. He saw Studd as a top babyface.
All right. We'll just go with that for a minute and ignore the fact.
That's what he saw. And then he came in and, God, we did vignettes with John, man, at Vince's house with all the heavy lifting and shit. And John came in and was working with a heel Andre, and Andre hated him. And Andre would stand on his hair and stand on him and just slap him down. And who could talk to Andre? I remember the night, I want to say it was Omaha. I think it was Omaha. I remember John walking in and saying, "Hey, Bruce, is Vince in his office?" I said, "Yeah." Walking in and walking out and saying, "Hey, man, it's great working with you. I hope to see you down the road." And walked out.
That was
but there were big things. I mean, Vince saw big things with Studd.
That was June of 89 when he walks out over what he felt were poor payoffs. Is that the same thing you heard?
Yeah, it was the abuse from Andre.
Okay.
It was, he was getting the shit beat out of him every night. Now imagine that, here's a giant of a man who's being manhandled by another giant.
So you're disputing that it was poor payoffs at all. You just strictly, it was Andre.
I'm telling you, the main reason for Stud leaving was he did not want to work with Andre, and he was getting the shit beat out of him every night, and there was nothing he could do about it. And he wanted to work with somebody else and do something else. And Vince, I don't know what their conversation was, but
did you ever have a conversation with Andre about why he disliked Stud?
Hell no.
Nobody knows. It's one of those mysteries that we'll never know.
No, there's no mystery to it. Andre didn't like any big guys.
Yeah, I get that.
Andre didn't like anybody that threatened the throne.
So he's just, don't you think that's a little weird that Andre is revered by fans online for quote unquote protecting his spot, but Hogan is just shit on routinely for doing the exact same thing?
Yeah.
There may be a drone flying over us right now that we just heard on microphone.
Probably so.
I wonder if it's from Stanford. So here's my question.
Bastard.
He goes, he being.
It may be what's his name? What's the drone's name? Oh, Vanguard 1. It may be Vanguard 2.
He's only out on Thursday nights. We're not taping on Thursday.
Got you.
Wrestlemania 5. So let's run through this. We just kind of ran through, main event WrestleMania 4, main event SummerSlam 88, main event Survivor Series, last guy eliminated from the Royal Rumble 89. Now we're at WrestleMania 5. He's on the third match on the card and does a double countout finish with Brutus the Barber Beefcake.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, nothing. I mean, he can't be on top the whole time. He had a great run. It cycles. You got to cool him off a little bit to heat him up again.
That sounds like the biggest bunch of bullshit answer I've ever heard.
That's the way you do it. You can't keep them hot. I mean, you can have the same guys in the main event every show.
Are you fucking seriously saying that right now? I'm looking at all my results from 88, 89. I don't see Hogan fucking working the third match anywhere. He can't stay hot all the time. He can't be the main event all the time.
He's the top babyface and the top money drawer. He's the babyface. He's the babyface that you feed.
I see why Meltzer hates your fucking ass. You just can't tell the truth for nothing.
I'm telling you the truth. You just don't want to accept the truth. That's what's wrong with you and your goddamn media-loving fucking dirt sheet writers.
Cool story. SummerSlam 89, main event this time is Hogan and Beefcake against Savage and Zeus. Right before that is DiBiase defeating Jimmy Snuka by countout. There is a noticeable dip here to me for DiBiase's positioning on the card. Can you give me anything, or are you just going to argue about it?
I'll even go back. Well, again, you're talking about Snuka, and Snuka at the time was another one Vince was looking to bring back. And Jimmy was a huge draw, and he saw Jimmy as coming back and making a major splash again. So it's to look at it again, hindsight's 20/20, and you look at it and go, oh, goddamn, that didn't work. But when they were booking it and putting it in that place, it is a way to, okay, Jimmy's coming back. Jimmy was this major draw and this major attraction for Vince and his dad for many, many years. So let's bring him back. You put him in with a guy like DiBiase to get him over. And didn't work. We didn't have the Jimmy Snuka from 1984. So it didn't work.
Survivor Series 1989, he's at least figured into a prominent match here. It's the Hulkamaniacs with Hulk Hogan, Demolition, Axe, and Smash as babyfaces, and Jake the Snake Roberts defeating the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, the Powers of Pain of Warlord and Barbarian, and Zeus. Of course, he being DiBiase, loses with a leg drop to Hulk Hogan, and the survivor of the match is Hulk Hogan. This is their only pay-per-view match like this. I find that weird that this is a guy that supposedly tells Ted, hey man, it's time for me to pay you back for what you did for me in 79. But then their only time they really work together is here. Help me understand that.
Well, no, they worked all over the place in 87 and 88 in house shows, and they had a house show program, but the business was different at the time. You had, again, in 87, you only had WrestleMania and Survivor Series. In 88, we went to 3. 84, they added the Rumble. It wasn't the proliferation of pay-per-views that you have now, and even at 4 pay-per-views a year, that was tried to be judicious and tried to mix those up as much as possible and make them different than the live event business and the house shows. Tried to have a little bit different attraction. So what was going on in the house shows wasn't always what they were building to on pay-per-views. It was kind of running 2 different businesses sometimes. There was a concentration. It was just different. It was a different business model at the time.
Royal Rumble 1990. He being DiBiase, pronouns pal, sets a new.
God damn it, pronouns.
Sets a new record in the Royal Rumble, lasting 44 minutes and 47 seconds. So he's still, kind of getting heated back up, or so it would seem. And then we're back for WrestleMania 6. And this is a match that Ted has said, in his opinion, was his very favorite WrestleMania match. He worked against Jake the Snake Roberts, and it was a singles match for the $1 Million Championship, which we're going to cover in a moment. And this had one of the very best promos, I think, from this era, with Jake the Snake cutting a phenomenal pay-per-view promo. If you haven't seen it, go out of your way. Jake the Snake, WrestleMania 6 promo, out of the park. I find it curious that through Ted's entire run, the match he hangs on to as being his best WrestleMania match was with Jake the Snake Roberts. Why do you think that would have been?
Probably artistically working with Jake and just the story they had behind that whole match and their history in the business. Both second generation guys. They both spent a lot of time together in Mid-South and kind of coming up through the ranks. But I think for both guys, I think they would consider the other a great opponent. And Jake at that time, man, was red hot. And he's just a red hot baby face, and Ted being a top heel, it all worked. It just jived.
Well, it's something that I'm still kind of struggling with, because it feels like the booking is similar to today, where you hear guys these days say that there's kind of 50-50 booking, and they're hot and they're cold, and they're hot and they're cold. And that's what it feels like through this period with Ted for me, where he's in the main events, and then the next pay-per-view, not so much. For most of let's circle back to right after WrestleMania 4. Leading into WrestleMania 4, he worked a match with Macho Man on a Saturday night's main event. He goes on in the WrestleMania tournament. People have covered this, and I'm sure we will in great detail in this WrestleMania 4 tournament one day, but he beats Hacksaw Jim Duggan, his old rival from Mid-South. He beats Don Muraco. And then, of course, he gets a bye into the finals, where eventually, and that was because Hogan and Andre went to a double DQ. And then, of course, he ultimately loses to Hogan. Coming out of WrestleMania 4, he works with Don Muraco at Saturday night's main event. I don't know when we'll talk about Don Muraco again. You got any good Don Muraco stories?
Don Muraco was one of the guys that Vince thought about for the Brother Love gimmick when I pitched it.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I like it.
I thought Donnie could pull that off and would be a great character for Muraco.
Well, I'm sure we'll cover that on a Brother Love episode. We should circle back to that.
That will never get voted.
Never. It's lost 3 times now.
No, it hadn't been on 3 times.
It has. Prior to SummerSlam 88, Ventura was a special guest referee for that Mega Powers, Mega Bucks deal. And in storyline, DiBiase was attempting to buy off Jesse Ventura. Whose idea was it to insert Jesse Ventura as a special guest referee there?
Probably Vince or Pat.
Why do you think Ventura was the right pick for that?
Well, Jesse had done Predator and he had done The Running Man. So Jesse was our own version of The Rock at the time, if you will, the closest thing we had to it.
Right.
And be able to utilize Jesse in a little different role. Jesse was a controversial character, a great character. Why not? Use him for something more than color.
Sure. After SummerSlam, before we transition into some other pay-per-views, this is back in '88 still, DiBiase purchases Hercules' contract from Bobby Heenan to be his personal slave. And while Hercules was confronting Heenan about it, DiBiase hit him in the back with a briefcase. They start yelling, and he starts slapping him. And then, of course, Hercules makes the comeback. This kind of came out of nowhere and was obviously an instant babyface turn for Hercules. What was the thinking here in trying to turn Herc?
Something new, something different, and we had pretty much run the course with Hercules as a heel, and Vince wanted to give him a shot as a babyface. So you put him with a top guy like DiBiase and do the turn with Heenan. And of course you put him in light blue tights, so then everybody knows he's a babyface.
Right after Survivor Series, I'm going to let that go. It was awesome, by the way. We got to get that. Right after Survivor Series 88, they have a Battle for Freedom match on Saturday night's main event, where Hercules wrestles Virgil with a stipulation that if
free at last,
with the stipulation that if Hercules lost the match, he would be considered DiBiase's personal property. There's just a lot wrong with that. Whose idea was this? Who booked this shit?
That would be Vince and Pat.
Are you ever going to take credit for any bad idea on this show, or is this just passthebuck.com?
No, this was before I was in the booking. At this point, I'm just doing TV and doing Brother Love.
I do want to ask a question about Survivor Series 88, because you hear this criticism about Raw all the time now. During the DiBiase's match, he pins Hercules with a schoolboy after a distraction of careers, whatever. Yeah. That's what we're getting to. So DiBiase pins Herc with a schoolboy after a distraction from Virgil. And 22 seconds later, Savage pins DiBiase with the exact same schoolboy, which I find hilarious. People complain now, about the number of finishes we see. Even back in 88, they were 22 seconds apart.
Got to get it in, pal. Get your time in.
So in the 89 Rumble, this is the stuff I really liked you guys did here. DiBiase purchases the number 30 from Akeem. And it almost works out, of course. We just talked a minute ago that it came down to himself and Big John Studd. That's a brilliant idea for the $1 Million Man to buy the number 30. Whose idea was that? That's.
Oh, well, if it was brilliant, then it was mine.
There you go. There you go.
I want to say it's Patrick's.
After, getting through the Royal Rumble, on February 3rd on the main event, DiBiase is back working with Hercules. He defeats Hercules there, of course. And then here's where we need to get to. We've been talking about this a little bit without going into great detail, but this is what a lot of people want to hear about. On the February 11th edition of Superstars of Wrestling, a vignette was done of Ted going into the Betteridge Jewelry Store in Greenwich, Connecticut, and telling the owner, Terry, that he wants to make him a belt. This is a real jewelry store, and they really did make the belt, as far as I know. You were involved in this process. We want to hear all about this belt, but first, we want to let everybody know that you don't have to be the $1 Million Man to get a $1 Million belt. Am I right?
You are right, sir.
All you've got to do is go to leatherbydan.com, and for only $9.99, you're going to get your very own custom championship. I mean, the $1 Million Man had to pay $1 million for his own custom belt, not you. Nay, $9.99, and you're in there, man. Your own custom belt. It's nickel. It's a 3-plater, and it's handcrafted right here in America. I am tickled with my Podcast World Championship belt, and you'll be tickled with your custom belt. Go to leatherbydan.com, and you don't have to be the $1 Million Man to look like him. He had a custom belt for $1 million. You've got one for only $9.99. I bet he didn't get it as fast. I bet it didn't have free shipping. I bet they didn't take payment plans. Leather by Dan gets the job done. Bruce, tell me about this $1 Million belt. Whose idea is this? When do you first hear about it? Do you think, oh, this is ridiculous? Or is it something everybody's all over right away?
God, I got to tell you, I love the idea. It fit DiBiase, and I just love the idea. If you can't win them, and what better way to display your wealth as the $1 Million Man? If you can't win a championship, then buy it.
Right.
And then buy your own championship. And he makes the rules, and he keeps it by hook or crook no matter what he does. But Terry Betteridge, Betteridge Jewelers on Greenwich Avenue in Greenwich, Connecticut. If you have a shitload of money to drop, go give Terry a visit and tell him Bruce Prichard, Brother Love sent you. But beautiful, beautiful jewelry shop, and Terry Betteridge is a world-renowned jeweler. I want to say he's a second-generation jeweler, as a matter of fact. But Terry used to bring jewelry to the office for Vince around Christmas time and shit. You know, when Vince would be Christmas shopping, that's how he would Christmas shop. Terry would bring in jewelry, and Vince go, I'll take that and that and that and that. Quite fascinating. So they drew up this $1 Million belt, and Terry was going to make it for us. And DiBiase and I went to go shoot the initial vignette that you just mentioned, where he went in to order the belt. And Terry is bragging about how he has started this beautiful belt and how great it's going to be. It's 18 karat gold, and it's got diamonds in it, and it's this beautiful thing. And he shows it to us. Ted and I look at each other like, ruh-roh, because you've seen the $1 Million belt.
Right.
I'm sure all of our listeners have seen the $1 Million belt. Well, if you look at not the middle plate,
right,
with the big dollar sign in diamonds,
right,
or the two side plates right next to it that are smaller dollar signs with diamonds. But if you look at the little dollar signs along the edge that kind of work as the leather wraparound of the belt.
Right.
Well, that was the size of the middle belt, of the middle plate.
The little side plates.
The little side plates. That size is how big Terry had made the centerpiece. And we were like, oh shit, this isn't going to work. Because it kind of looked like one of those belts Elvis would wear on his Vegas show, you know, when he got into the white leather.
Yeah.
Yeah. And immediately called Vince and said, hey man, this isn't going to work. And we got Terry on the phone, and we brought I forget what belt we brought over. It was either one of the WWF championship belts or an Intercontinental, but just to give him a size reference, because he had no frame of reference. He's thinking belt, and he's thinking grandiose, so he's thinking Elvis belt, you know, a big belt buckle like that. So we had we had to push the debut date of the $1 Million belt back a few weeks to allow him time to make the three centerpieces much, much larger. And there were actual diamonds in that belt.
Okay. So in another skit, you know, there's, I guess, 3, is that right? 3 visits.
Okay. Order it. What's the progress? And then the unveiling.
There you go. And so he says it's not good enough. He wants more diamonds. He wants solid gold. And then the next time he goes, it's on Superstars. He returns to pick up the belt, and he walks in, throws his arm in the air, and he's got on a Dracula cape, which is really weird.
Yeah.
Whose idea was it to have the $1 Million Man wear a cape?
Well,
how does this happen?
I saw Vince had this cape, and so I borrowed the cape and thought,
Wait.
wouldn't it be great if you like went in and threw the cape like over your shoulder and shit, and you had a cape? It just worked. He's $1 Million Man.
Hang on. This is Vince McMahon's personal fucking cape.
It was, yeah.
Why does Vince
also had, remember that full length, it wasn't mink, but the full length fur coat that DiBiase wore in some of the vignettes and shit?
That was Vince's.
That was Vince's too, yeah.
Why did Vince have a cape?
Doesn't every millionaire have a cape? I don't know, man. I'm not a millionaire. I don't have a cape, but I thought every millionaire had a cape, so I thought the $1 Million Man should have a cape.
Wow. So they don't show the belt as he's
We didn't
here.
show the belt because there was no belt to show at that time. We put gold cups in different articles underneath that to make it look like there was something there. But the reason we didn't show it is we didn't have it.
So he actually debuts the $1 Million belt on what show? Do you remember?
That would be the Brother Love show.
And it was the first.
You can do it on the big show, man.
I like it. It's the first time it's seen on camera. And prior to this, DiBiase was revealed as being Brother Love's mysterious benefactor. How did that come about? And how much exactly did the $1 Million Man contribute to your Love Ministries?
About 4 of the rings on Brother Love's fingers were of the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. I'd use his watch from time to time. Sometimes my watch would cock-a-doodle-doo. But, yeah, he was a great benefactor. And he had to prove that in the bars at night to be able to make sure that Brother Love was properly hydrated.
So let's talk about the belt a little bit. I know you say this thing has real diamonds. I'm of the impression that the real diamonds are actually on the back and what's on the front is all CZs. True or false?
Conrad. The belt has real diamonds in the damn thing, okay?
So all the stones on the front of the belt are diamonds.
I didn't say that, Conrad.
I just said that there are diamonds, but they're on the back, and that the majority of what we see that you guys have portrayed as diamonds are actually CZs.
Well, as my good friend I.W. Marks used to say, he used to call them PZs, pubic zirconias. But yeah, the diamonds are on the back. The real diamonds are on the back.
Thank you for
set in the leather on the back.
There's leather on the back.
Yes, brown leather.
What else can you tell us about this belt we've all heard so much about?
It costs a lot of money.
Nope, I'm not going to let you get away with that. I need a number.
Well, I'm not going to tell you the figure.
We're not talking about what a guy's fucking payoff was. It's not personal income, you motherfucker. How much did this belt cost?
It costs a lot. I want to say it was close to $50,000.
I was going to guess 40. So,
well, you obviously haven't shopped in Terry Betterich's Jewelers.
So yeah, what you're paying for is who's making it, where they're making it.
Shit.
And that it's totally custom. But this thing is it's not solid gold, obviously. It's not filled with real diamonds. Why is it so expensive?
Because it was custom made and it was gold.
But not solid, it's just plated.
No, it's plated gold, yeah.
But I'm just saying, you could plate that in gold for way, way less than that. And if those aren't really diamonds and they're just CZs.
You had a world-class jeweler design it and do it. I mean, that's what cost.
But do you realize how ridiculous that sounds? Man, you had a world-class jeweler make this belt out of fake gold and diamonds.
Well, you want a world-class designer to design shit. It costs money.
But shouldn't you actually use world-class materials?
He did. It was beautiful leather. I mean, it was nice.
Leather. There's rumor and innuendo that the WWE still has this belt and that it's in a safe in Stamford. Where did you last see the belt?
I don't know. You know, there's I don't know if they got it back or not. But I know that when Teddy left, he gave the belt to a member of the ring crew. And sometime after that, Linda, because it was an expensive belt, Linda called Ted and asked him to please send the belt back.
Right.
Ted said, I do not have the belt. I gave it to someone on the ring crew to take back with them to Stamford. She said, well, who'd you give it to? And I don't know if he knew the name or what, but they did some investigating. No one could find the goddamn belt. So she called Ted again. She said, Ted, don't mean to be, but it's an expensive belt. You were the last one to be seen with it. We really need you to send it back if you have it. And Teddy was adamant he did not have it and that he had given it to a ring crew. So I don't know if they ever found it or not. I know Ted is told me in private that he did not have it, that he told me the same story. I mean, he's never wavered on his story, and I believe him because Ted's not the kind of guy to do that, especially if he was asked, he would have given it back if he had it. Maybe they did find it, maybe in a safe. I don't really know, to be honest with you.
Ben Brown is the WWE archivist, and Ben listens to the show. Ben, if you're listening, tweet a picture of this belt at the show if you know where it is. Please, kind sir. You teased us with it last week, so let's hear it. We want to hear about the time you lost the $1 million belt.
Well, we had been in maybe Hartford, Connecticut, maybe Hartford, maybe Providence. And we finished up there, and this is myself and Ted DiBiase, and we were heading to Boston. It was like the last. It was probably Providence because we were going to fly to Boston. We were going to Boston to fly out. He was going to fly out from Boston, and I was driving back to Connecticut. So wherever the hell we were. Anyway, we get to Boston, and we're in a Ford Bronco. So we have our bags in the back of the Bronco. We go to Chinatown, and we go to our favorite little restaurant there in Chinatown, and we have some great food, a lot of adult beverages. And we come out, and it's about 2 o'clock in the morning. And we're walking down a side street. We had been parked on the street. And as we're walking down the side street, we're getting closer to the car, and this guy comes around the corner from a building. It was like apartments and office buildings and shit. But there's no activity because you're in Chinatown, and there's, other than the restaurant, there's nothing open. And this guy comes walking towards us. And we see him, and we're coming up on the car, on the Bronco. And we look, and the window is bashed in on the Bronco. The side window is bashed in. There's broken glass all over the ground. And we look, and we go, oh, shit. We open up the door, and we look, and our bags are gone. Someone ripped us off. And we look up, and this guy's still walking towards us. And he's got his arms outstretched. Kind of like, hey. And he looks and he says, $1 million man, Ted DiBiase. Let's make a deal. And we're looking at each other like, holy shit. Somebody saw us arrive, broke into the car, stole our shit. Now this guy wants to sell it back to us. And he gets closer and he gets closer, and it's dark out. It's 2:00 in the morning. As he gets closer, he looks around and he looks and he sees all the broken glass on the ground and sees the things been broken into. We've got the back door open. And he looks and he goes, "Oh, shit, man. Hey, no, shit. I didn't do that, man. Hey, I just wanted an autograph. I saw you come out of the restaurant, man." And the guy turns around and takes off running. So we're like, this is the weirdest fucking night. You know, what the hell? And so we start going through the car and shit. And Ted looks at me and says, "Hey, man, the belt's not here." The belt was carried in a separate gold Halliburton everywhere we went. And we're going through there, and the only thing that they left in the car was my briefcase, which had been kind of in the back on the floor. But they stole my garment bag. They stole his garment bag. They stole his briefcase. They stole all his shit. And we're like, motherfucker, somebody stole the $1 million belt. It's like, what do we do? And we're looking all around. We're seeing if anybody saw anything. We call the cops. Cops come out, make a report. And I said, well, you got to call Vince. I'm like, why do I got to call him? You call him. Hey, motherfucker's on my belt. But I end up, there's a little payphone there. And it's now 2:30, 3 o'clock, maybe 3:15 in the morning. And I make that call.
How'd that go?
Hello? Hey, Vince, it's Bruce. Yeah, pal, what's up? Well, I'm here with Ted, and we were on our way to Boston, and we stopped and got something to eat, and somebody broke into our car, and it seems that somebody stole the $1 million belt. Well, what the fuck do you want me to do about it? Well, I mean, I guess nothing. I just want to kind of make you aware that Ted lost the belt. And he's like, God damn it, nothing I can do about it. Call the fucking news. Make some goddamn noise. Wake somebody up. Which I had already done by waking him up. So long story short, we get to the Hilton there at the airport, Boston Airport. And we check in and we start calling people, and we're looking for Virgil, because Virgil usually was pretty good about grabbing the belt. And as I started doing my investigative work, I'm like, well, Ted, shit, man, are you sure you had the belt? And he's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I had it, because Virgil, we weren't riding together. So, I'm responsible for the goddamn thing. And we can't get Virgil to answer his phone in his room. Well, lo and behold, we later found out early in the morning that when they were going to the airport, Virgil did have the belt. And I woke Vince up at 3 o'clock in the morning on a false alarm, and I let Ted make the next call to let him know that he found the belt and that it was a mistake and all that other good shit. But it was a weird night in Chinatown in Boston, by God. A little kabuki-ish.
Let's fast forward to February 23rd, 1990. It's the main event. DiBiase beats Jake the Snake here, and afterwards, Jake ends up stealing the $1 million belt, and that's kind of what gets them programmed for WrestleMania 6. But along the way, DiBiase has a match with Jake, and the Big Boss Man attacks Jake, handcuffs him to the ropes, and steals Damien, because the belt is, of course, in the bag with the Snake. So after the beatdown, they, of course, walk over to the Brother Love show, because that's where all the big stuff happens. You're there, ready and waiting, and DiBiase talks to Slick about how good he paid them both. Big Boss Man apparently knows nothing of this payoff, and DiBiase then demands that the Boss Man reach his hand into the bag and grab the belt. After DiBiase accuses Bossman of being scared to put his hand in the bag, he does so, shows it to DiBiase, and then tells him he's going to have to get it the old-fashioned way. He's going to have to earn it. So he throws the belt back into the bag, goes back to the ring, and gives Jake the key to uncuff himself and hands him back the bag. So this is now 2 times that DiBiase has involved money and payoffs to turn a heel babyface with a manager. And it happens very quickly. They do a very brief program together, and then it's dropped. Why do you think Bossman DiBiase didn't have a longer program? Because the goal was just to get Bossman babyface and on to something else and continue the Jake program?
Essentially, but let me tell you a good story about the Jake program. That was at a time that we were doing, there was a little spot in that program where Jake talked about, hey, DiBiase, all you got to do is stick your hand in the bag and get your belt. But are you really sure it's Damien in that bag? It could be, and we did these vignettes with the most poisonous snakes in the world. And in the studio, we had our snake handler. Snake handler's name was Albert. And I hate to say this about something, but he was a fucking goof. I mean, a guy that spends his entire life in swamps, catching poisonous snakes and raising snakes, and also, I'm not even sure Albert's still alive. I think he died from a snake bite. But he had been bitten all these times. And he brings to the studios in Stanford all these damn snakes, these different poisonous snakes. He had that bull-headed thing, the most poisonous snake in the world. He had cobras. He had all kinds of shit. He also had 2 spitting cobras that spit venom, and they blind you and paralyze people. And they can spit it like 60 feet. Well, the snake handler, Mr. Albert, wasn't always the most coherent person in the world and liked to dabble in extreme narcotics at times. And believe it or not, Jake the Snake might have toyed in that from time to time, has been chronicled in his life story. So there was a point where they slipped and the 2 spitting cobras got out of their enclosure. And we are in a studio with a black floor, black curtains, and everybody runs out. Guess who the only son of a bitch that stays in the studio gets caught in the studio, essentially? My fat ass. And I go up a ladder that they used to hang lights and sat up there with 2 spitting cobras loose until I could get the fucked up train or snake stalker trainer to come back in and catch them. So, yeah, I hated that program. Sorry, sidebar.
No. I think everybody digs those. At SummerSlam 1990, Sapphire was supposed to wrestle Sensational Sherry. But before the match, DiBiase buys the services of Sapphire, so Sherry wins the match by forfeit, and that sets up DiBiase and Dusty Rhodes. So finally, Virgil. Why was he not on SummerSlam 90, second biggest show of the year?
He who?
The subject
DiBiase or Dusty?
DiBiase.
We just said he was. Didn't he buy Sapphire?
No, he did. But, I mean, he's not wrestling.
Because he was going to do the angle with Sapphire.
Okay. Of course, we've covered Survivor Series 1990. DiBiase captained the team that debuted The Undertaker. If you'd like to hear that story, Survivor Series 1990 is up for your review in the archives. On the November 22nd episode of the main event, which was the day after the Survivor Series, DiBiase challenges the Ultimate Warrior for the WWF title and loses. It was actually taped prior to Halloween, even though it's airing the day after Survivor Series. Royal Rumble 91 is Dusty's last pay-per-view with the promotion. DiBiase and Virgil beat Dusty and Dustin Runnels. which we covered earlier on our Dusty Rhodes episode. DiBiase then orders Virgil to put the belt on him, and Virgil hit him with it. A few months before this happened, you could start to slowly see the seeds being planted. Virgil separating from DiBiase. Why was this decision made to separate them? Was it just the natural storyline arc? And what was the expectation of Mike as a performer?
It was a natural progression of the storyline, and Virgil really wanted to work. He wanted to wrestle. So he had been training, and obviously he had been trained by the Samoans originally to be a wrestler, and that's what he wanted to do. That's what he wanted to try. So we figured, give it a shot.
What was the feeling in the office? Did they think this would be a one and done thing? It feels like there's not a lot more for him to do here.
Well, it was simply a way to get Virgil out of the managerial role and into the ring. That's the gist of it. It was a natural. I mean, all that time, those two guys as heels and the relationship, it was a natural.
As we build towards WrestleMania, DiBiase loses to Virgil by count out. Virgil had, of course, been cheered on by Roddy Piper, and Piper was ringside with him. During the match, Sensational Sherry, who earlier in the show had turned on Randy Savage after he lost his match to the Warrior, came down to help DiBiase. What was the thinking in putting Sherry with Ted? That he needed somebody who could take the bumps and such, get the heat? He needed something else? I mean, obviously he doesn't need, somebody to talk for him. Is this just the old all heels need a manager?
I think so. I don't know what that thinking was. Obviously Virgil wasn't the promo guy and didn't do promos. Ted didn't need anyone to talk for him, but it was, I don't know if they felt that Ted was not enough on his own and needed somebody, or maybe it was just that philosophy that they felt, heels need a manager, and just another way to freshen him up, give him a new coat of paint, and put Sherry with him, and also to freshen Sherry up and give her something to do as well.
SummerSlam 91, I know you weren't there for this, so we'll move quickly. DiBiase loses the $1 million belt to Virgil. After that, DiBiase competes in an unaired King of the Ring tournament. That's right, 1991, where he wrestled Ricky Steamboat to a draw. Do you remember before you left there being discussion of a King of the Ring tournament, or no?
Well, I think there had already been a King of the Ring tournament with Harley many years before that, even.
Yeah, that's right. But
so they'd been doing that.
Was there? I guess what I'm trying to get to is, when did this become talk of, hey, let's make it a pay-per-view? Was that done just in 93 or well before that, and it just took a minute to get around to it?
No, it was done in 93, looking for, maybe doing something in the middle of the summer.
On the Survivor Series Showdown in 1991, and aired on the USA Network, by the way, DiBiase regains the $1 million belt from Virgil with the help of the Repo Man, which I'm sure we will cover when and if Demolition win a poll. But I love that is the way to debut the Repo Man. Go steal the $1 million man's belt back, which makes total sense. But, where the fuck do you go with the Repo Man from there? I don't know.
I wasn't watching at that time, so.
Well, I get it. DiBiase is in the 92 Royal Rumble. Again, Bruce wasn't there for that. We get lots of requests for the 92 Royal Rumble. We're not going to cover it. He was not there for it.
One of the best Rumble matches ever.
Probably because you didn't book it, right?
Probably.
Ric Flair wins it at the Tuesday in Texas pay-per-view. Circling back a minute, DiBiase and Repo Man defeated Tito Santana and Virgil. Now, I only mentioned, yes, thank you. That's what I was looking for. Because I realized I skipped it, and I'm like, wait a minute, let me go back here.
Damn.
DiBiase tagging with the Repo Man against Tito Santana and Virgil.
What the hell did Teddy and Tito do?
Right? At the end of the DiBiase Sherry run, it all just comes kind of quietly to an end where Sherry proclaims her love for Shawn Michaels. Meltzer reported at the time the WWF was going to put DiBiase and Shawn Michaels together as a team. Do you have any sort of recollection of that, or is that rumor and innuendo?
I've never heard that, so I don't know if that was true or not, but I never heard that. No, I knew that, there was always talk of Shawn being a single, and so no, I never heard that.
After the split, the decision is made to pair DiBiase with Rotundo, and he, of course, debuts the character IRS, Irwin R. Shyster. I don't know when we'll talk about him again. Whose idea was IRS, and what did you think of the pairing of he and DiBiase?
Well, the IRS was Vince's idea, and I did the initial vignettes with him. We actually did those in the studio in Stamford, Connecticut. It just seemed like a natural thing, money and money. $1 Million Man and the IRS man.
So Money Inc. quickly win the World Tag Team titles from the Legion of Doom on February 2nd. And at that point, DiBiase and IRS hadn't even debuted on TV. Why was the decision made to pair Jimmy Hart with these guys? Is this still just all heels must have a manager? That seems like such a foreign fit for Jimmy Hart to be with DiBiase.
I don't know. I mean, was I even there then? When was it?
This would have been
February of '92. I wasn't even there.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't there, so I don't know. I don't know what the thinking on that was, but I would, if I was going to guess, I would venture to guess that it was for that reason. Heels need managers. Hogan must pose.
It's rumored. That's a T-shirt. We got to have a Hogan must pose shirt. It's rumored that the original WrestleMania 8 plan was supposed to be Money Inc. defending against Jim Duggan and Sergeant Slaughter. That didn't end up happening. They wound up facing the Natural Disasters and winning the match, or losing the match rather, by count out. And then we move on to the Natural Disasters actually winning the tag titles on a house show, which is kind of random, July 20th of 1992. And then Money Inc. wrestled the Legion of Doom at SummerSlam 92, and LOD wins the match when Animal pins DiBiase after a power slam. Money Inc. regains the tag belts when you're back in October on a Wrestling Challenge broadcast. So it's his story as a tag competitor is similar, I guess, to his singles. He's kind of up and down, up and down. And he kind of talked about before, DiBiase did, where he could feel that he was slipping a little bit after working WrestleMania 5 with Brutus and then SummerSlam with Snuka. He felt it slipping and didn't know why. And he felt that he just needed a little more, and then he would have been over the top. And supposedly, Hogan agreed with that. Do you have any sort of recollection of DiBiase expressing that he was unhappy with his level of push after him debuting so big and then seemingly being cooled off so quickly?
Well, he wasn't cooled off quickly, but he was definitely feeling, what the hell can I do? Why am I not on top?
Right.
And I think all guys go through that when they experience that, and they're there and they are cooled off. They want to know, well, what the hell can I do to get back there? And he felt that if he could just get that next umph, and he could be back to where he was. But that cooling off period, I think, in my opinion, is essential sometimes, especially for a heel.
November of 92, Saturday night's main event, Money Inc. defend the titles against the Ultimate Maniacs, Randy Savage and the Ultimate Warrior. Money Inc. loses the match by countout, but of course they retain the titles. DiBiase's in the 93 Royal Rumble as well. He has an early entry with number 4. He's put out by The Undertaker. And then Money Inc. starts working an angle with Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake, which sets up a match for them at WrestleMania 9. This is one of the very early editions of Monday Night Raw where all of this happens, where DiBiase and IRS attack him with a briefcase, because this is right after Beefcake is kind of telling the story of the parasailing accident, which happened a couple of years prior, and that he's got all of these injuries and precautions that need to be taken, and now they're hitting him in the face with a briefcase. Why was this done where Jimmy Hart turns at this point? Do you recall?
Well, the whole reason that the angle and everything was done was, and the reason it was done with Money Inc. was because they trusted Ted. They trusted Ted and Rotunda with Beefcake. And Beefcake was fragile, and they didn't want him getting hurt and any more damage being done to his face. So they trusted DiBiase. I believe it was Ted that swung the briefcase. Pat Patterson was the one that went down and put the gimmick in his nose and all that shit. But that was simply a matter of trust, so that, Hogan liked working with both those guys, and they trusted him with Beefcake. Jimmy Hart, that was a situation because Jimmy was doing a lot of Hulk's personal stuff at the time outside of wrestling, and they were traveling together and put them together in front of the camera too.
I find it interesting. Obviously, we know how WrestleMania 9 ended, and we'll cover it at some point. But that Hogan here is working for a tag title match as opposed to the world title. He would, of course, leave world champion anyway. So, shows you what I know. Meltzer reported in the March 15th Observer that DiBiase had herniated a disc in his back and was going to be kept out of the ring until Mania. Do you remember there being any concern as to whether or not DiBiase could make this show? We're winding down his singles career here, or his wrestling career, rather. Do you remember there being any sort of wonder or concern? Oh, shit, we've got this booked. Is he going to make the match?
Yeah, there was definitely concern because he was hurt. And if you listen to the doctors would all say, don't get in the ring, don't wrestle. And Ted really wanted to do it. Didn't know what he would do if he didn't wrestle.
Right.
So, they're going to go find the doctor that says, no, it's okay to wrestle.
And he did have a Lloyd's of London policy, which I'm sure we'll get to in a minute. At the King of the Ring in June, Money Inc. teams with the Head Shrinkers to take on the Steiner Brothers and the Smoking Gun. Billy Gunn pins DiBiase with that dreaded small package. The next day, on June 14th, Money Inc. would lose the titles to the Steiner Brothers, then win them back on June 16th, and then lose them back to the Steiners on the 19th. And all three of these title swaps were done at house shows, which is very unique, especially in 2017. Do you recall these house show title swaps, and why was this so common at the time?
It wasn't common, actually. It was uncommon. That's why we did it. We wanted to put some value back in the house shows and be able to say to people, hey, anything can happen on any night. It just doesn't happen on TV or on pay-per-views. The perception was that if it's a championship match, that title's only going to change at a pay-per-view. And that was the feeling we were getting from people. So we wanted to mix it up and say, hey, by God, it happened in Saginaw, Michigan last Tuesday, but you won't believe what happened on Sunday night in San Bernardino. That was the thinking behind it.
Money Inc. would never win the tag titles again, and then they would go ahead and split up. DiBiase would work a short angle with Razor Ramon, and then after Ramon lost to the 1-2-3 Kid on Raw, DiBiase starts giving him a hard time about it, but then he himself loses a match to the 1-2-3 Kid. That sets up a match between Ramon and DiBiase at SummerSlam 93, which Ramon won. And SummerSlam was Ted's last appearance on WWF TV. He would leave the company a short time after. And Bruce, Ted has said that he decided to leave the WWF to fix some marital problems, or he had gotten maybe a little too much into partying and the lifestyle, so to speak. Do you recall his departure from the WWF, and how did you first hear about it, and how was it received?
Well, Ted and I were friends outside of the ring as well, and Ted was going through some rough times. and the business lifestyle was not a friend of Ted DiBiase's, because try as he would, it was hard to, after all those years, at the end of the night, it was hard to just go back to your room and go to bed. There's a winding down period, at least for me, there always was. There was just a winding down period, and it wasn't the easiest thing to just go back and chill out in your room by yourself. So Ted was fighting a lot of demons, and his family was very important to him, and he made that decision. His health wasn't that good. His back wasn't good. And he knew that if he continued, it was only going to get worse, and the temptations were still going to be in front of him. He didn't feel he was strong enough at that point in his life to just say no. So he said no to the business and felt that if he removed himself from the business, he would remove himself from temptation and go home, work on his family life, and take care of what was important.
In September, Ted returns to the All Japan Wrestling promotion and reforms his tag team with Stan Hansen, and they win the tag titles again. On November 13th, they're stripped of the tag titles, which is apparently a yearly tradition at the time, so they could do the World's Strongest Tag Determination League. I guess I said that right. Probably didn't. They defeated Tracy Smothers and Richard Slinger in the tournament, and Ted suffered the neck and back injuries that forced him to withdraw from the tournament. He returns to the WWF in January of '94 as a commentator this time for the Royal Rumble. So how does this come about? Is this the time when he cashes in on the Lloyds of London and can't get in the ring, but can still participate in the business as a contributor on the headset?
Exactamundo.
He forms the $1 Million Corporation and becomes a little bit of a heel manager. The faction would go on to include IRS, Bam Bam Bigelow, Sid, Nikolai Volkov, King Kong Bundy, Kama, Tatanka, and the 1-2-3 Kid. They had a good run for about a year or so. Anything in particular stick out to you about the $1 Million Corporation besides the Underfaker, which we'll cover in our SummerSlam 94 episode?
No, I thought he had a good run then, and he was able to give guys, Bam Bam Bigelow wasn't the greatest talker in the world. He was able to elevate Bam Bam during that time. Sid, I don't know that he did much for Sid or Bundy, but it was a good group at that time and gave him a little bit of prolonged life. And then he went on to the biggest star that he ever managed, after that with Steve Austin, the Ringmaster.
Well, before we get there, DiBiase managed Bigelow in the main event of WrestleMania 11 against Lawrence Taylor. I'm sure we'll get to a fun story for that when we cover WrestleMania 11. Can you whet our appetite for that WrestleMania 11 episode?
I had a lot of fun with Lawrence Taylor. Lawrence was a lot of fun and a absolute natural in the ring. Floyd Mayweather was another one that was a natural, but when LT first got into the ring, you can always tell by looking at a guy the way that he walks in the ring whether they're going to pick it up or not. And LT was just a natural athlete, and God, he was a stud. But he was a lot of fun, easy to work with, and that was a fun WrestleMania with all those guys.
We'll get to it at some point. Around the end of 95, DiBiase is on the search for a new $1 Million champion. And on January 8th, 1996, that very edition of Monday Night Raw, the Brother Love show of all places. Was that the last Brother Love show? January
may have been either that or Brett. Obviously I did a couple of more appearances, but not a Brother Love show. It was either the Ringmaster or one with Bret Hart.
DiBiase introduces the next $1 Million champion, the Ringmaster, who we know to become Stone Cold Steve Austin. DiBiase's last appearance on WWF TV was In Your House #8, Beware of Dog 2. It happened in May of 96. This is the one where they lost power. It was originally scheduled for May 26th. It lost a pole. We'll cover it at some point in the future. As the storyline goes, Austin was facing Savio Vega in a strap match, and if Austin lost, DiBiase would have to leave the WWF, and of course, Austin lost. So, in reality, he really left to go to WCW, and Meltzer reported at the time that DiBiase gave his notice to the WWF that he would be leaving to go to WCW when his contract expired, which is believed to be in August. Meltzer reports it was a 3-year deal with WCW, worth $225 for the first year, $250 for the second year, and $275 for the third year. And he had planned to go in and work as a manager and as an announcer. He also had this Lloyd's of London policy paying him, which we've talked about in great detail in the Mr. Perfect episode, if you'd like to catch up how that works. But he believed, he being Meltzer, that it was going to pay out as a major lump sum because of his career-ending neck injury. Once he's with WCW, of course, DiBiase is a member of the NWO at one point. That's how he debuts in the crowd, and then goes on to manage the Steiner brothers. He's actually in WCW from 96 until 99. He kind of indicated that Bischoff didn't really have anything for him after the NWO concept. He didn't really need to manage the Steiners. So he asked to kind of go his own way and asked for his release, and it was granted. So he did not, continue the wrestling move as long as maybe he could have, and got into the ministry. He released his first book around that time, and really started to get heavy into the ministry. He returned in 2004 briefly as a member of the creative team. He was there for about 1.5 years, I guess. And then in April of 2005, he was hired as a creative consultant and a road agent for the SmackDown brand. So I want to hear about Ted in 2004 and 2005 and how you convinced him to be an agent and what his role was on the creative team, or what he really did.
Oh, I didn't convince that poor bastard. Stephanie McMahon convinced him. Ted's great in the ring, and Ted is great at coming up with his own stuff and wrestling in the ring and putting together a terrific match. Ted's also really good at working with young talent and helping them make sense out of what they want to do. Ted is not an idea guy. He's not really a good finish man. He can go do it. He has a hard time telling you how to do it. So he was a fish out of water. He wasn't comfortable. He didn't like it. He put on so much weight when he was on creative, and it would be the same story every week. He would just go, "Bruce, this isn't what I do. How did I get myself into this?" And I'm not happy. And he was away. God, he was away from his family more then than he was when he was on the road before. So Ted just wasn't really happy. He didn't enjoy that process at all. And if it were not for Dusty Rhodes, Ted probably would have snapped and gone home a lot sooner. There was a point where Ted had, I guess it was a heart issue, but I was there. I was up in Stamford. It was during one of my weeks that I would have to go to Stamford. And I'm at the office, and we get a call from Dusty, and it's like, Teddy, we're on our way to the hospital. We're in an ambulance. We're sitting there having breakfast, and his eyes rolled back into his head. And I looked at him, and I said, "You all right?" And he just fainted on me. He just, boom, he's out right in the middle of the restaurant, right there in front of everybody. And so we called the 911. I got the ambulance. We're over here at the hospital. We're like, what the fuck? So we go over to go check on Ted, a couple of us, and one of the funniest things was Ted is laying on a gurney in the emergency room. They got one of those curtains around him, and they've got all kinds of shit hooked up to him. They got monitors and everything, and they're putting IVs in him. And the nurse comes in, and she either needed a she either needed a urine sample or Ted had to pee. One of the two. I don't remember. But she hands him one of those plastic urinals, and we're standing there, and she says, well, he might need some help. One of you guys want to help him? And I don't know why this was just funny to me, but Dusty steps back with, he gonna relieve old Jumbo now. Everybody get out of the way. It was just one of those things that Brother Love, the $1 Million Man, and the American Dream are in the emergency room, and Dusty says, everybody watch out, he's going to release old Jumbo now. And it was, I guess you kind of had to be there, but us trying to tell Teddy we weren't going to hold the urinal for him while he released old Jumbo was, I guess, funnier to me than, well, you know. Spend my day working hard on the go. That's all I got, folks. Sorry.
Ted inducted
it's late at night now.
Ted inducted Sherry Martel in the WWE Hall of Fame in 2006, and then Duggan in 2011. He himself went into the Hall of Fame in 2010. He was inducted by his sons, Ted Jr. and Brett DiBiase. He did have a couple of other brief appearances. The night after WrestleMania 22, he offered Eugene $1,000 to dribble a basketball 100 times and then kick the ball away, recreating his old famous angle. On the 15th anniversary of Raw on December 10th of 2007, he won a 15-man battle royal. He wasn't even wrestling in. His former partner, IRS, actually won the match, but DiBiase came down and offered him a bribe to let him win, which is kind of funny. May 19th of 2008, DiBiase was shown sitting with Mr. McMahon having a business discussion. And the next week on Raw, Ted introduced his son, Ted Jr., as the newest member of the WWE. What did you think of Ted Jr.'s time in the WWE?
Underutilized. I thought that Ted Jr. I thought he was an excellent talent. I thought he was well above average. He could talk, he could wrestle, and he looked great. But Vince didn't even want to use his name. Wanted to give him a different name.
Wow. And
it was almost as if he was snake bit from the beginning. I don't know what it is that they didn't see in Ted Jr., because I thought he had it all. Young, good-looking guy. I would put him up there with Randy Orton. I thought he was special. I thought he had it. I enjoyed his work, and he had the pedigree, and it just didn't work out for him.
As fate would have it, Ted, who everybody believed to be one of the best wrestlers in the company, never became the WWF champion or the Intercontinental champion. He would have, of course, the $1 Million belt and a couple of tag runs. And he's now a Christian minister. In 1999, he founded the Heart of David Ministry, and he's traveled the world ministering to churches, children, camps, conferences, prisons, man, everywhere, including Promise Keepers, Youth of the Nation. He's had a couple of books. Every Man Has His Price is one of them that you could pick up on Amazon. What do you think is Ted DiBiase's legacy as a professional wrestler?
Everybody's got a price. To me, Ted DiBiase was the perfect, if you could draw out a plan of what you would want a wrestling heel to be, and I also dare say a babyface as well, but he was a much better heel. And if you could draw out a blueprint and plan for what that would be, you would draw Ted DiBiase.
Well, I gotta say, I'm pretty excited that we were able to cover this, especially in such great detail. The $1 Million Man is somebody who I believe is going to be remembered forever as one of the greatest gimmicks in the history of the WWF. And kind of this podcast to me today was worthwhile just because we got to hear the Vince McMahon cigarette story on the airplane, and that you kind of realized was the genesis of your understanding of who the $1 Million Man was really based on. Anything else you want to touch on here before we kind of move on with this one?
No, I think we covered it, but you know what? I think we probably missed a lot too, because Ted had a great career that spanned so many years and touched so many people. I'm sure we missed something. And I'm sure that our audience will let us know, by God. Thank you for that.
Well, I'm really looking forward to next week's episode, because now's the time in the show where we get to go ahead and circle up and talk about what we're going to do next week. And we never just do what we want to do. We always kind of get some feedback from you guys to hear, hey, what are you into? What are you digging? So let's go ahead and run through this week's topics. Were selected by Mr. Bruce Prichard himself. It's my turn this time. So we're going to run through the 4 topics that we've singled out for this next week, and you're going to be eligible to vote for these topics on Sunday night, anytime Monday, or the wee hours of Tuesday morning. Topic number 1, the DX invasion of Nitro. It happened in 1998. It's been on the poll before, but it's back now. This is the one where a lot of people remember it was referred to as a tank, and DX tried to drive it into the building when, for whatever reason, WCW was running Nitro not too far away from where Monday Night Raw was. What might we talk about if the DX invasion of Nitro wins, Bruce?
We're going to talk about the 911 calls from WCW to the Smyrna Police Department, the different encounters that we had with the different police folks in Atlanta, Smyrna, and also there in South Kakalaki.
And one of those was in Virginia.
Norfolk, and it was everywhere.
Topic number 2, and this is one that's also been on the poll before. It almost won. I'm excited to hear what we might talk about if Katie Vick were to win the poll next week.
Ouch, what the hell was happening in the room next door? What it was actually really supposed to be and how it was actually supposed to play out. Hunter's real reaction, my reaction, and the fallout, which was brutal.
Topic number 3, which is one that I feel confident is going to win. Let me just call it right here. The ravishing Rick Rude run of the WWF, one of the classic 80s characters that we all fell in love with. What might we talk about if ravishing Rick Rude were to win the poll?
Well, we're going to talk about Rick's, obviously, his time in WWF and his run with the Ultimate Warrior, his run-ins with the Ultimate Warrior, and the ups and downs of the ravishing Rick Rude.
Topic number 4, it's time. It's Royal Rumble season. We might as well cover one. It's the 1994 Royal Rumble. This one is famous for a couple reasons. What might we win if topic number 4, the 94 Royal Rumble, wins, Bruce?
Well, this is the one where we had the double finish of Brett and Lex Luger, both winning the Royal Rumble, leading to the double main event situation at WrestleMania 10. And, of course, Bob Backlund involved in that Royal Rumble as well. But kind of the decision-making behind that, and a lot of rumor and innuendo surrounding what allegedly was supposed to happen.
Some guys who were in that Royal Rumble that you may remember: Scott Steiner, Quang. Look, I got it right that time.
There you go, not Quang.
Diesel, Bob Backlund, Jeff Jarrett, Virgil, Crush, Mabel, Sparky Plug, Mo, Tatanka, Doink the Clown, Great Kabuki, Bastion Booger. Lots of fun stuff going on in the 1994 Royal Rumble. So let's recap one more time. Option number 1, the DX invasion of Nitro. It happened a few times. We'll cover them all. Number 2, Katie Vick. Maybe the worst angle of 2002. Probably. We'll discuss it in great detail. The one that's going to win, ravishing Rick Rude. We'll cover his whole run in the 80s. The Ultimate Warrior, everything in between. And the 1994 Royal Rumble, just because it's Rumble season. Those are your 4 topics. Look for it at Prichard Show on Twitter. That's the only place to vote. It's going to go up on Sunday evening. It will be pinned right to the top at Prichard Show. And don't forget to throw us a couple of follows. I'm on Twitter at Hey It's Conrad. Bruce is on Twitter at Bruce Prichard. We'd love to interact with you on Twitter. We try to stay very active there. And we also want to let you know that next week we're going to have a contest where you could win tickets to our live event, which is going to be on April 1st, right after NXT. It's at Back Booth. You don't want to miss this. If you're going to NXT, you're less than 2 blocks away. You won't miss a minute of NXT. We're going to wait until that show ends before we start our show. And if you get VIP tickets, you get early access. You get to meet Bruce, you get a picture with him, you get an autograph, and you also get to figure out, hey, where do I want to post up? Because it's first come, first served. These VIP tickets will sell out by our next episode. Go ahead, Bruce.
I was just going to say that. If you want to go VIP, you better go quick because they're just about gone.
They are.
You can't get VIP. Come on down and come see us anyway, please.
You're going to have a great time either way. We get lots of questions about this. I want to reiterate it again. We are not recording it. We do have guests who are confirmed to be a part of it. They have one request. Please don't tape this. We're going to talk about stuff that we don't want aired. We don't want recorded. We don't want transcribed and repeated. There will be alcohol flowing. It will be a great time. It'll be the most interactive live experience you've ever had. We're going to try to do something special. We'd love for you to be a part of it. You can only get your tickets at one place, notarib.com. If you're going to Wrestlemania, you need to be a part of this. Make it part of your package. Notarib.com. The thing's going to sell out. If you want VIP, hurry to notarib.com.
Check this out. Dave Silva is coming to Orlando, not for WrestleMania. He has no tickets to WrestleMania, has no interest in going to WrestleMania, is flying from South Texas in the Valley to Orlando just to go to the live Something to Wrestle With.
Well,
he's got his 2 VIP tickets.
Dave Silva, shout out to him, is one of the great friends of the show who takes care of us in a major way here and helps with all the graphics. I also want to real quick go ahead and give some love to somebody who helped me with a lot of research this week, and this is something that is always time consuming, and Chris Warzinski really helped me out this week, and he is online at WrestlingThings.com. It's your one-stop shop for all things wrestling related. It's the only wrestling merchandise / auction offer site in the world. You'll find tons of rare wrestling figures, DVDs, VHS videos, shirts, and more. It's free to join and sell. It's WrestlingThings.com, and follow them on Twitter at Store Wrestling. That's at Store Wrestling. And big shout out to Chris for helping me with all of the Ted DiBiase research this week. We'll be back next week to discover what happened when Ravishing Rick Rude came to the WWF. I'm calling it now.
You don't know that's going to win, Conrad.
Well, keep it from winning. Go follow at Prichard Show and vote against it this Sunday. At Prichard Show, vote in the poll. Let's set another record next week. Bruce, you got anything before we wrap it up?
Hey, just 2 last shout outs. Todd Grisham, congratulations going to the UFC. And also just a shout out to my good friend John Paul Shelnut, whose dad is not doing well in America's Georgia, and I hope that John Paul's a good friend of the show.
Shout out to JP. I had no idea that was going on, man. I hope everything works out as good as can be expected, but we're going to make sure that next week is as good as you expect, because we're going to go deep on Ravishing Rick Rude. See you next week right here on Something to Wrestle With. That's the end of the show. Why are you still listening?
The world of MLW Radio never stops.